What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous, dripping with fantabulousness co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We are excited to bring you another episode of the biggest, most awesomest podcast in the media business. Yes, it has happened. It took a little while to get here, almost 2 weeks. We are the most popular media property as of now, ranked number one on every single chart you see. Incredible. Thank you all for your support. Grant, how the heck are you doing? Actually, I'm going to say very quick psych because I've decided of what I'm already going to title this episode, and it's going to be misleading for anyone who is clicking on this and expecting to hear one thing. It's going to be something else. We're going to talk about the NBA playoffs. Go figure. Grant, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing well. You broke the news to me. It's surprising. I didn't know that today was the day that we had ascended to the mountaintop of all media. That's really exciting. Also, when you start that bit each time so far, I've like forgotten that that's like a thing that's happening frequently now. And it's like, wait, what are we? Oh, right. Oh, right. It's the bit. I'm doing very well. Thanks.
What bit? These are facts.
No. Yeah, no, I know the bit. I mean, we should move on. I feel like I just stepped all over it. NBA playoffs, huh? They're happening. Every series.
We're gonna.
Well, should we even? Okay, I know we weren't going to say, "Oh, this is stale. This is stale." We're just going to talk about the situation as it exists right now, and go with it. Yeah.
So we're recording this before the dyad of Game 5s that we're going to see on Tuesday. This will go live immediately. So maybe you're listening to this before those Game 5. Shout out to you. And we're basically just going to get into our biggest questions for every remaining NBA playoff team, insofar as they have to do with the series. It's not going to be, well, are the Cavaliers going to trade Donovan Mitchell after this summer? That'll be a question for a different podcast. So where do we want to start? Let's start with the teams that are not playing on Tuesday. If you want to bounce around, you will see the timestamps. I always put them in there because we are the biggest sports media property, or the biggest media property in existence. We want to make sure that you have timestamps about, like, that's just the level that we're operating at right now of all these luxuries.
Well, maybe we ought to start with the easy one of the two that are not in action tonight, which is Boston, Cleveland. I don't know how you absorbed it, but like I vaguely remember that Donovan Mitchell had that didn't quite look right in Game 3 with the calf, and then like fairly close to tip because I just hadn't been up on it. It's like, oh, he's not playing. It's like, well, am I watching this game now? And I did, and it was like. I guess before I throw it to you, the number one thing I could take away from that game, which is like obviously compromised because you don't have Jared Allen and now you don't have Donovan Mitchell, and Boston is Boston. I think probably the main thing I would take away is that, like, from Cleveland's side, I am starting to wonder really seriously about whether the whole is less than the sum of the parts in Cleveland, which is, like, you should have gotten smoked really without Mitchell there. But Garland played pretty well. I think he had 30. And Mobley didn't have crazy numbers, but actually had some finishes inside where he was just like, oh, I'm bigger than whoever's on me. I'm going to turn around and dunk it, which, those have been in, to my mind, like fairly short supply. And you just wonder, like, we're not going to get into all the offseason stuff necessarily, but I feel like that game offered a little more evidence that maybe like the two bigs and two smalls, which we've talked about a ton, just isn't producing the returns that it feels like it should, and they're not that much worse off maybe with one of each or two of one and one of the other. Obviously they're worse without Donovan Mitchell. Like, we don't even need to like put that out there.
By the way, the performance he had in Game 3, where he really went at Boston's defense, and like they were like the way that the Cavs operate out of the pick and roll in that game, and he was injured apparently. Like, it's just, and he's been banged up because he had the PRP injection right before the playoffs too. Yeah, just absolutely magnificent. So kudos to him. But as we're recording this, he's, I think, listed as questionable, and not many people are expecting him to play in Game 5. And then Jared Allen's just dealing with this rib injury, and the fact that it's kept him out through these critical games is like, oh, shit. I can't believe he's still listed as questionable. Like, at some point, are you doing that as gamesmanship to maybe keep the Celtics on tilt, and you just know that, like, just rule him out for the series and season at this point?
Yeah. Well, speaking of, unless you want to hit my half-baked theory about Cleveland.
Well, I did.
Please do.
I wonder how much of it is like, Is it, I guess, because we saw it earlier in the year when they were dealing with these injuries and like they just go on these runs, but it's, or not go on these runs, but they had that incredible record during the stretch where Mobley and Garland missed a ton of time. And now we're kind of seeing it's not the inverse, but like now Mitchell's not there. And then the Cavs looked one way like this, but it helps that you're not always going to get that game from Max Strus. I think there's probably Karis LeVert's one of his better games of the playoffs. And so I wonder how much of it actually has to do with, is it less about the four and how they fit together and more about, well, does this embolden some of the other like supporting cast members? To even Sam Merrill goes 2 for 7 from the field, but like, okay, the volume is there. And he was crucial at the beginning of the game. He hit those 2 threes, I think, in the first quarter. I'm not dismissing your theory. I guess there's something to, it's funny that I said we're not going to do the Cavs need to break it up at this one. I find that interesting, but I still feel like it would be more of a situation where it's one of the four where you think it makes it easier. And I'm very much of the mind that we haven't seen enough of what their best 5-man unit would be to kind of go that route. And you might get to a point and say, you know what, that kind of like where the Pelicans are now, we're just never going to be at full strength when it matters most. And so like, that's the sample and we have to work off it. So I'm not quite as far there as you. I really do think to throw it back to you, I want to see where this team would be if they didn't have so many of the stop and start absences, to where it almost feels like Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland were better together last year than this season. And a lot of that probably had to do with, well, there was more time on the court together from them. And so does that familiarity, those reps, how much do those matter? And that's why, it's different when you're fitting in a supporting cast member on the fly, where it's like, we need to play Marcus Morris tonight. It's easier to account for a guy like that. And you might look better because it's such, you have your pecking order is simplified because you're missing, not to forget about Jared Allen, but offensively, like, okay, you're missing Donovan Mitchell. Like, we know what's going to happen now with Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, and then what's going to happen on the margins with everybody else. And when you're fitting in smaller pieces around that, you're bound to look better because it's an easier adjustment. Whereas now, if you're throwing another all-star player into the mix, so certainly someone who needs to operate on ball into the mix, it just gets like you're forcing adaptation, not just from role players, but there's a trickle-down effect on at least 2 stars there.
Yeah, I think it's really, I want to clarify, like, I'm also not totally convinced that we got to bust it up. This isn't going to work. The thing that, as you were talking, strikes, it's just so unfortunate that this is year 2 of this roster, essentially. Like, they added Max Strus this year, but like, I feel like we know less now than we did before, because like, and you said, and you're right, that Garland and Mitchell weren't as good together this year as last, and that's like discouraging. But like, I mean, some of that is just Garland has been worse, and he's the one that again started the year out with like a couple freak injuries, and just like that can throw the whole operation off. And then to say nothing of like everybody else, having long stretches where they're out. So yeah, I don't know. I think really it was a game effort to just get back to the game from the Cavs for most of it. I also never once thought that Cleveland could win that game, and that's and to flip it to Boston now, like,
can I actually ask a question about the Cavs?
Sure. Yeah.
What is it going to take for them to generate Evan Mobley easier buckets? You mentioned it was cool that he had those possessions where it was just kind of, not strictly yamming on dudes, but it's, you're smaller than me, and like I am a little bit stronger than I was last year. And so I like seeing that physicality from him, but I'm just like, can we do something that doesn't involve getting him the ball from a standstill?
Yeah, it's got to be addressed on all sides. Like, some of it is he's still not he doesn't, I don't know what it is. Like, he's not an intuitive bucket getter. Like, he just doesn't seem totally wired that way, which is why it was so encouraging to see him get like some Aaron Gordon duck-ins on small guys and just go up, right? Like, just don't think about it. Don't think about,
right,
where's the right pass, what, like, I got to gather, just go up, he's so long. Like, he really can just extend over centers too. He had a couple little baby hooks too that were just oversized. Like, he can do that. So some of it's him, I think, and being drilled on just like, hey, remember how big you are when you're close to the basket. We don't need to overthink anything. I think some of it is like, the spacing crunch when he plays with Allen, like that's a real thing. Some of it is, I don't know, maybe he's just too deferential to to the fact that like we have Mitchell and Garland and those guys generate the offense, and I'm not, thinking to score that way. And then I guess the other aspect is just schematically, like it just needs to be a point of emphasis for Bickerstaff and for the rest of the guys on the roster that actually have the ball to figure out, like, is it on the roll? Is it like, does he need to be like a baseline cutter? Like, again, to draw the Aaron
Should he
Gordon
be bringing the ball up more?
just bring it up, see what happens. Like, initiate a pick and roll with one of the small guards and, like, I don't know, have Mobley be the ball handler, see if that gets you anywhere. At the very worst, you might get a switch where a big is out on Garland all of a sudden or something.
I hope
I
that
don't
we
know.
might see more creative. And again, I like he's actually he's been really good this series.
Yeah,
I just want to see
I'm
more
optimistic now. I feel better about Mobley now, certainly, than in last postseason.
And I kind of thought, though, just like we might see more of that functional progression because of the injury to Jared Allen, but now also in that game 4 specifically, Donovan Mitchell's out. But I guess maybe it's like, if it's not something they've been actively doing or been unable to prioritize because of their seasons felt so stop and start this year, like right in through the postseason. So it's probably unrealistic to think about. But to your point about him maybe not being wired as a scorer, if you're putting him in situations where either it's you're using him as like kind of this on the move playmaker, or you're just giving him less time to think. And it's more like about reacting than trying to get those deliberate buckets. I feel like that might be where he excels even more than that. So I was just something that stood out, but I think you absolutely have to appreciate what you said, which is having some of those really physical possessions and coming out on the right end of it, because that needs to be definitely a tool in his belt. It's just when you look at him, because of how he's built, it's not something that I view as like playing the Aaron Gordon type role, like as the analog. That's just not something I view as, I don't want to say sustainable, but the optimal deployment of Evan Mobley.
Yeah, and like I think we both are very in on Aaron Gordon. Like, he's phenomenal at what he does, but like, you want Mobley to do all that and more, right? Like, ideally.
Honestly, Gordon's been bringing the ball up more than Mobley lately. So.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. Just anecdotally too, like, it doesn't feel like you see a lot of, probably because Allen is in there a lot of the time, not in this series, but generally, where it's like, how often do you just see a straight pick and roll that gets Mobley a lob for a dunk? Like, I don't feel like you get a whole lot of those with Cleveland, and I probably should have just looked it up because that information exists. But it seems like if you're talking about, let's get him something where, like, talk about one where you don't have to think and you just react. It's like, he can't do like the Derek Lively, just go up and get it type of thing. Or, even Gafford. Gafford is like hardwired to catch lobs. That is like what he does. But I feel like if you're trying to spoon feed, is maybe not the right term, but just kind of make it easier. Like, some of that would be great. And just more cutting, more in. I don't know if putting the ball in his hands is going to be the way to, like, get him in a position where he's not thinking more, like, I feel like that's when the gears start to grind a little bit more.
He's at 3.5 roll man possessions per game at the moment, which is like almost a quarter of his offensive possessions. I would just say that number needs, especially when when there's only the one big, it feels like that number should be exponentially higher.
Yeah. It's easy to explain it if there's a second guy there, because you just sort of can't do it. But yeah, that rings true.
What question you got for Boston?
Well, like, I guess the big picture question is, like, should we be discouraged that, like, they kind of had Cleveland hanging around in this game? I mean, like, you're kind of concern trolling at this point because they're going to win the series. It's probably going to be done in 5. They gave away one. Like I said, game 4 never felt like it was, really up in the air. But, like, the reason that the Cavs kind of hung around is a lot of the same Boston stuff, like, happened offensively with the ball not moving, the pull-up jump shot, like, after 15 seconds of dribble pounding, like, that kind of stuff is very much still just part of their identity. And you mess around and get away with that against Cleveland with, 2 starters out. It's one thing. I guess maybe the biggest question is like, will Boston just be able to continue getting away with what it does through the Eastern Conference playoffs, which is like, because you're going to get New York or Indy, and it's just for different reasons. I don't know that either of those teams are going to be up to, like, really making you pay for the bogged down offense and for all the stuff we've always, harped on about the Celtics. It's hard to come up with another takeaway for me, honestly, because, like, plus Porzingis isn't there. That might change things a lot.
Yeah, but can you even guarantee that Porzingis is going to be? When is he supposed? We haven't heard anything resembling a concrete timeline for
yeah.
him.
I don't know. How do you feel about Boston? Is it kind of the same thing? Like, just, yeah, we know what the issues are. They haven't had to pay for him yet.
I would agree with that. And then I sometimes wonder if do we read too much into games like they played down to the shorthanded Cavaliers. That could happen with teams. You lose that game to Miami with basically playing nobody at that point, but it's okay. They made 83 pointers.
Right.
And so if for some reason with Boston, it feels like we read into the variance of their opponents and then sometimes read less into their own variance, where case in point here, they're shooting the Boston for the series is shooting 33.3% on wide open threes.
Yeah.
That number is what it's at like 40% for the playoffs, which isn't astronomically high, but when you're also factoring in the 33.3% they've been shooting through the last 4 games, that is astronomically high. And so it's okay. Derek White should be hitting more of his open looks. Al Horford couldn't buy a bucket in game 4. And so there's going to be variability caked into the way that they like to play. So I don't feel worse about Boston. If anything, it feels like they might be the team that we understand the best, but maybe we also don't because will they be tested at the level they need to be tested before they get to the finals? It's the question would be like, is there even a way, or is it realistic to expect them to change the way they operate on the offensive end when it's been something that's not just ingrained into this season, but basically like the past few years of Celtics basketball? And I guess what gives me hope or makes me inclined to hold them to a higher standard is that we've seen when it doesn't stick, when they're not playing to drain the shot clock, like they kind of were down the stretch with Cleveland. And so part of it to me is this a mindset thing where it comes back to a Jason Tatum, or even sometimes you'll see it from a Jaylen Brown, less so from a Drew Holiday or a Derek White? And is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It might just be the defining flaw of this team. The more I watch them, I don't know if it's definitely not going to be a fatalistic flaw in the Eastern. Like if they don't make it out of the Eastern Conference, let whatever it takes. We probably won't, but I give everyone permission, or I encourage them, let the takes fly, because this is not a team, even with flaws and all, or even if you think they're kind of sleepwalking through this is a team that should emerge from the Eastern Conference losing a total of maybe 4 playoff games, and they've already lost 2 of them. So you have 2 more in the bank. They're that good. Even without Porzingis, I would argue. They definitely don't need him to reach the finals. Going against the Nuggets or the Wolves or the Thunder or the Mavs, entirely different story. So I don't know that I definitely don't feel worse about them, especially when to your point about Cleveland specifically. Like when you look at that Miami game, it's just they hit 23 3-pointers.
Right.
Like what do
you're losing that game. That's basically like,
right. It's like, so what do you want them to do? And then in this one, it's more just like, well, Cleveland's kind of been the optimized version of itself when it has 2 of its 4 best players missing. I can't explain it, but like that's just been something that they've done. I mean, like they also had this is like having Dean Wade back's a big deal. Like I don't think people realize how important he was to what they're doing defensively. And so I still, it would put me like, this might be the way to frame it based off what you've seen. And I don't necessarily know where your priors have been. If the Celtics make it to the finals, which of the West teams would you pick them to beat in a best of 7 series of the 4 that are remaining?
Yeah. I mean, I was going to flip it and say like, don't you think that either any of the 4 West teams remaining would be giving Boston a better series than it's going to get prior to the finals? Like
it should, but will Boston may get a better series on its own accord?
Yeah, no, I think obviously I would say Denver now, although sure wouldn't have said that last time we recorded when they were down 0-2. I'd probably say Minnesota could beat them. And I think Dallas and OKC, I'm not sure, but certainly at least 2 of the 4, I think I would pick over Boston in the finals. Like, what's your number? Do you think it's more than 2?
I think it's only the Mavs at this point. I think even with, and we'll get to the Thunder eventually, so I won't jump there just yet. But I think it's the Thunder have shown that even when they're struggling, there's like a more of a stability, and maybe it's because they have more optionality on the roster, where it's Boston's optionality is just built into their top 5. Like you don't need anything else other than stuff. Like you can't, anything that you have an issue with Boston, it can be resolved with their top 5 or 6 players. Whereas OKC, it's, well, we kind of have to play like the Giddy, like are we pulling him? And then it's all right if Isaiah Joe isn't really taking or making threes, like what do we do there? Is this case of Wallace night? So they have more buttons that they kind of need to push and experiment with. But the way that they've played, and even like their win in Game 4 over the Mavericks, just like where it's just Shea, but then they're so imperfect, and yet they're still finding ways to beat you out on the margins.
Mm-hmm.
Boston seems to lack that sometimes, where it feels like when they're not playing up to their usual standard, it's a confluence of things that kind of just compound on top of one another and makes the entire product worse, rather than, man, if we could, it's not just that the offense bogging down. It's like they kind of just look lackluster with their half court defense when they're not making shots. And so it's like infectious almost.
Yeah. For a while, I don't know, maybe this is still something worth exploring. Like, for Boston, do you ever think about how the fact that, you mentioned their top 5 guys, and that's very different than when you're including Porzingis, because he is the guy that punishes switches. Okay. But when it's Horford and the 4 wings / guards / forwards, it's kind of like every defense is just going to switch at least 1 through 4, and even probably feel okay switching 1 to 5. And so that just invites a lot of the like stagnant, I'm going to get a 2-point jumper off the dribble or a step back 3 up, because we can't create advantages by guys having to, fight over screens, go under, trail, like rear view contest. It's just like, it's kind of built in a little bit where it's like, you're almost asking for ISO ball when you have 4 like primary ball handlers / scorers that can all theoretically be guarded just as well by like a 2 as a 4 or whatever. So you're just going to switch a lot. But that doesn't explain the other stuff you're talking about with Boston, where it's like, it's not just that the offense bogs down. It's that for stretches, they kind of just don't seem to have it, like in competitively or defensively or just like mentally. So,
and that they do, which makes it more frustrating, where it's not, it's not a team of question, but can they actually reach and sustain that level? It's like, yes, we've seen it. Yeah. And that's what makes them so maddening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, it's so hard to just dismiss how dominant the regular season was for them. Like, just, I mean, not talked about enough, like one of the all-time most just runaway, conference finishes, and just the net rating was way up there all year. But then it's just like, this doesn't seem like that team so far. And I think it's just because they haven't had to be. And then you worry about like, well, how good of a team do you have to be for us to trust you can flip the switch, so to speak? Like, because it does feel like Boston will have to flip it at some point, probably in the finals. And you look at the regular season and say like, well, clearly they can, but we just haven't quite seen it. And you wonder if you get like deconditioned a little bit I saw somebody today was asking like, will this be the easiest road to the finals any team has ever had? And it's like, it's a conversation just because of the injuries that they've seen on the other side and what's probably waiting in the conference finals. Like, you're just not going to get, I mean, the fact that Indiana would be like the healthiest team they're going to see, and Indiana is a team that like, I don't think anybody sees as a serious title threat or has at any point this year, is kind of like, it's pretty wild. So I guess maybe the real thing is now I'm just eager to see Boston like really tested. Like, whenever that happens, I think that's the most exciting thing going forward, at least in the East.
Who do you think is the best? It sucks that I would have probably said of the teams remaining that the Cavs probably had the best chance of testing them, but then the Donovan Mitchell injury happens. And so I guess it probably is Indy at this point, just because you look at how fast they play. And like, that's just not like, if Boston's going to have one of those high variance nights where they're missing shots, or if Jason Tatum, what is he shooting 23% from deep for the conference semifinals? So if his, back to his jumper not falling at the clip that you needed to. So I think the answer is probably, and I mean, that's not really, they're the healthiest team. They're missing Benedict Mathurin for the season, but it's just kind of like, other than that, they're still dealing with maybe some of the ramifications of their midseason turnover. So it is a little bit uninspiring though.
Yeah.
This team is so, but I think it was you mentioning how dominant they were in the regular season is important, because that team is just so good. And if you look at them, and for like almost, I know that the Nuggets exist, the Timberwolves had a great year, but like the Celtics should just be the runaway favorites to win the title.
Right.
And logistically, the fact that their odds of coming out of the East are so high, it's like that's already just getting there is a huge part of the battle. And so the fact that we think we know they're going to be there should make them even more of a runaway favorite.
Right. Because, even if you think Denver, and I think I'm getting back to that, like, still is the best team probably, or like, I think they'll win it, but like, they're not guaranteed to be there at all. Like, their percentage chance of being there was in the probably single digits, like, not that long ago. So Yeah, I don't know. Should we get to? Do you have anything else here? Do you want to get to Thunder Mavs?
Yeah, let's talk about let me start with the Mavs. I'm just like, my biggest question is, what is it going to take for not just Kyrie and Luka Doncic to get going in the same game, but for consecutive games as scores? And I think there are two caveats here. Is the Luka's knee is just, you can see it. Like
Yeah.
he's actually strung together a lot more good defensive possessions than I would have expected over the course of these playoffs with him dealing with that sprained knee. But like, you can just see it, like in terms of getting to his spots, or when the way that his 3-pointer has not been falling for the most part during these playoffs, and is definitely impacting, you know, he's back to kind of being whiny Luka. Whereas we saw it definitely in the game 4. And then with Kyrie, it's a little bit frustrating to see him not look for his own shot more aggressively, especially early on. But then he's done some really nice things as a playmaker. I think he's had, specifically against Thunder, a fantastic defensive series. But like, you're not like, yes, you want that stuff from those guys, but like you're paying them to get buckets. And I know that OKC has taken away not taken away, but they're encouraging you to live with well, go give it to PJ Washington, go try and throw it to one of your bigs in the middle of the floor, or you give it to a Dante Exum or Derek Jones Jr. or Josh Green, and so on and so forth. Or if you're Jason Kidd and it's crunch time and you're just going to sub in Tim Hardaway Jr. for some reason. I don't know what more they're supposed to do. And it's almost, we saw the Thunder, because PJ Washington was playing so well, especially early on in the game 4, like they kind of even got away from, we're going to throw the kitchen sink at these two. And it still didn't like result in either one of them. I don't even want to say taking over, but like looking like they should as scorers. And I do think there has to be something to, the Mavs are so built around Luka Doncic having the ball. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But when he is not Luka Doncic, when he's this injured, it's not that it's not an excuse, but like you don't have the safety valves. You don't have the experience tapping into them, because he is so central to everything that you typically do. And I think as a player, if you're going to be on the court and that's the level of agency you had over the offense all year, but basically your entire stint there, the onus is still going to then fall on you. And like, then it becomes fair criticism of like, like at least don't complain. Like, don't exacerbate the situation by not getting back on defense.
Yeah, I'm surprised you beat me to the complaining thing, because even in, a tightly contested, not do or die, but like obviously hugely important game 4, the thing I thought about most was how fucking annoyed I was with Luka, and how much like I've just officially arrived now at the point where like I don't enjoy watching him play. Like, at least relative to like how great he is. Like I'm not taking anything away. This is not like, it shouldn't even need to be said. Like, there's no argument that against him being a truly great offensive player. And like, he played great defense for most of the series too, despite being injured. But like the constant complaining and the foul baiting and the flailing and just like all the, and not even when he's not complaining, just like his expressions toward the refs are just like, this is, I don't know what somebody will measure this someday, but like it cannot have a positive effect on your teammates when you're just like it just, I don't know. It's super frustrating. He's so much better than this. Like, it doesn't need to be this way. And it makes him unlikable and like harder to watch. I don't feel like that's an uncommon opinion. I feel like maybe that's how a lot of people feel. But like, I think the fact that he's clearly injured is making all of that worse. And that was like my main takeaway, weirdly, through most of that game, game 4, was just the fact that we gotta, like, I know you're hurt. I know it's frustrating. I know Lou Dort is basically like tackling you on every possession. Like, we can't do this. This is not helpful. And it just left a sour taste in my mouth. Having said all that, like, pretty amazing that he's that banged up and Dallas is still tied in this series with Kyrie. What do you think about Kyrie? Because it feels like it's being painted as like a choice, like his sort of every commentator is referring to it like, well, he kind of likes to ease into things in the first half and get teammates involved, and then he goes on these runs and has big second halves, except like when he doesn't, like in game 4. or what do you think that is? Is because it is really conspicuous how deferential he is early in these games when maybe he needs, clearly with Luka hobbled, like he needs to be like, I'm getting you 40 like every night, right? Like that just I don't understand the thinking.
I think Mavs fans who've watched more of their games this year can probably speak to it better than anyone, but they're like, I think that's just what he's been in Dallas. And I don't know if it's a matter of him and Luka Doncic work so well kind of independently of one another together, but like we don't see a lot of like Luka and Kyrie. And maybe it's just because of who Luka is, and just like you can't, like if you were to do something with, like, let's just boil it down to, if you wanted to run pick and roll with Kyrie and Luka,
Mm-hmm.
the person who is most comfortable handling the ball in that situation, like Luka Doncic is not a screener, is my, like that's just not something that he's going to do. And so how do you kind of, can you put him in the post and then have Kyrie just throw him entry passes? But like that's not really, so it feels like that's just been a season long theme at least. And I don't know that it's actively a choice, but it almost feels like it's his role
Mm-hmm.
or mindset by design. And can you ask him to flip it during the playoffs? And I guess part of the reason you pay and trade for Kyrie Irving is so, yes, that he will. But I mean, I'm with you there when you kind of, I mean, we could give all the credit in the world. Jalen Williams has been all over Kyrie for a lot of this series, so good for him, especially when he's been pretty rough on offense.
Mm-hmm.
But like, and they've thrown bodies at the Mavs, but it's like Kyrie, there. I don't know. Is it just he's getting older? And so it's like when you're like in the face of like this athleticism, or if you're going to see two on the ball, like you're just more deferential
Yeah.
in general. I honestly don't know. I wouldn't, do you ascribe it to just as a choice the way that I didn't, I guess I haven't been paying to the announcers enough to hear them say
Yeah.
that.
I think it's hard. Like, that's why I framed it that way initially, because it's hard when you see the things that he can do still. Like, I think, I mean, I don't know. I don't know who needed to see it or hear it, but like Kyrie Irving is just like a breathtaking, like offensive basketball. Like he still has all of the, like he had I think it was in game 4 where he was like driving left and one-handed it in his left hand and didn't put his right hand back on the ball and throws like sort of an over the head dump pass, like just right underneath perfectly for a dunk, like offhand. He's like, his physical skill is just still beyond like anything. And so when you see him do things like that, it's like, you could probably find a way to like force up a few more like semi tough shots if you really wanted to. So that's why it feels like a choice to me. Because I just don't think, he's someone that you like shut down, like really
Mhm.
ever. Like I just, that's not, he like, I think the best description I ever heard of like why he's so difficult to guard is like he doesn't really have a plan. He just waits for you on defense to like do a thing, and he's like, "Oh, I know what to do now." And just because he can do everything, either hand, either foot, there's just like there's no game plan to stopping him because he doesn't have a preconceived idea of what he's doing against you until you screw up, basically, which is just like the most badass way to play offense. It's so cool. But yeah, it doesn't seem like he can be stopped if he doesn't want to be, or at least prevented from getting shots up. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to knock it. Like Dallas has advanced this far and they're not super healthy where it really matters. So it seems to be working, but could have done with a little more in game 4. Is analyzing the rest of this series from Dallas's perspective as simple as like, are we going to get a big Luka game, or is this
Well,
just what it's going to look like going forward?
I think the other thing you could ask is, are they going to hit their free throws? Because
Well,
that's, I would argue there's reasons why they lost. They like game 4, there was some weird crunch time decision making, but like they could have easily put that game away given how the Thunder shot from 3 for, I mean, the Thunder made 6 shots inside. They were 6 of 20, I believe, in the restricted area.
and the other stat I saw is they went 37 minutes in the of game time without a restricted area basket. just,
That is bonkers.
just
I mean, like, and
never
yes,
ever scoring inside.
and also the other thing that's happening is like that was all for most of that game. It was, I know Jalen Williams, J-Dub, your guy. I don't know what's going on with him offensively necessarily, but he's come on a couple times down the stretch, but it was like Shea willing them back into that game. And so the free throws just become so important. I mean, so important here. And like, they're shooting, I think it's under 64%
What
from
were
the
they
line.
game 4? Do you have the box score? It was like 10 of 20 something. 10
Yeah,
of
it was
20.
they missed more shots at the foul line than the Thunder made at the rim during the year. So it's just like that's not ideal. And when you have such a, like when you win the 3-point battle specifically, while Luka's shooting so poorly and Kyrie's not giving, it's just, my God, that feels like such a missed opportunity by them. And so like, that's a stupid question. Can you hit your free throws? But they've played, look, for a lot of that game, because they were leading in game 4, and it's just been a lot, like, they've been really physical on defense. Like, OKC was missing some higher quality looks from deep, but like, the Mavericks have been in their face. They're running them off the line. They've gotten them to take, like, yeah, Shea wants to get to like the mid-range of his spots, but I think that this series has kind of also highlighted how the Thunder could use more of a, not that they need someone better than Jalen Williams, but he kind of maybe needs to develop even more counters inside the arc in terms of side-to-side amble, just because you really only have Shea in that regard. It's also why it's been such a weird series for Josh Giddey. I know everyone's kind of pointing to, oh, he was a net plus in game 4. Okay, awesome. Like, that lineup with him on the court is still getting blasted for the playoffs night, or definitely for the series. So I just, like, you have to control your controllables, I guess, from Dallas. And so if Luka is not going to be Luka, to just like be this down bad at the foul line is really problematic for them. And they're like, look, for the series, they're losing the points off turnover battle. They are winning the second chance points battle. They're about even. It's actually pretty closer on the break than I would have expected. I think they've done a good job, this is to say, of kind of displacing Oklahoma City from a lot of their element and kind of limiting them to the half court. And this is also a team that they're about even. It's like within 6 points of each other of points scored inside the paint, which is, you know, I that's fine. It's like the free throw stuff, especially if you're not going to have the version of Luka Doncic that you need. But it probably is as simple. I don't know if I don't want to absolve Kyrie of blame here, but it really does. Like, if this is just the version of Luka you have, I don't know if you're going to get enough, even if Kyrie is scoring 30 points a game or something, to then win this series.
Yeah, I think that's right. I want to correct myself. 12 of 23. I'm sorry if you said it was Dallas from the foul line in game 4. And everybody fixates on the one that Luka missed, because that's always, that's the most conspicuous. That could have tied the game late. But I mean, that's like, I just don't know how you overcome making half of your free throws, slightly more than half of your free throws in a game you lose by 4. It's kind of like fixating on the officiating as the reason you lost. It's like you always want to throw out stuff like free throws too, but like in this instance, especially with the Thunder being 23 of 24, it's like the game really was decided at the foul line. That's not an outlandish thing to say.
And it's also just like, they have, if I told you this at the start of the series, that on possessions in which Derrick Jones Jr. has registered as even a partial defender on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the Thunder as a team are averaging under 0.99 points per possession. If I would have told you that at the start of the series, that we'd be going into game 5 and that's the number, you might have said Dallas is up 3-1.
I'd say, how did we get to game 5? Probably. Or did they change the rules? That's crazy. That's amazing. And it's just like, it's not like the shots that Shai hit last night to seal that game were easy. They were all just contested pull-up twos. Like the one went over the corner of the backboard.
Yeah, he said that in the post. He was like, yeah, that was, what did he say? Like, that was ill. I don't know what that was.
Yeah. I love his post games because he actually thinks about the question. You can tell he is actually listening to the question, and then basically gives you an answer like that. Or it's just like, yeah, I don't know. I prepare, and I made this. It's just like very simple. One other thought I had with respect to Dallas, and granted, it's part of the scheme. It seems like for the Thunder that PJ Washington is gonna just get some really clean looks at 3, and some of them are gonna come from the corner. But micro, do we need to be careful about deciding who a player is when he's only ever played for a bad team / a poorly run franchise, which is the case for Washington in Charlotte? And macro, how much more do we need from Gafford and Washington, if anything, to sort of make us have to relitigate, was that trade worth it? Because I think we both said it was too much. You can't, these guys aren't needle movers of a great enough degree to justify making it so you cannot compete with the bigger offers this summer in trade, because you gave up, you dipped into your first round pick equity, which wasn't great to begin with. It's kind of like the Gobert question we talked about before of is the trade officially justified now because Minnesota is a contender? And even if that's only for a second, isn't that all you can ask for? So have Washington and Gafford contributed enough and put the Mavs on a high enough level to where that cost is now justified? I'm asking. I don't know. We need to work it out.
It's a weird situation because they could make the conference finals. That's the thing that
Right.
could happen. And so in theory, it's worth it. I'm just more of the mind of, okay, well, then how do you go from here to actually winning the title? And if it happens this season, or if you make the finals, then it would seem like yes. But there seems something, I don't want to say it's ephemeral about what's happening, but it's the West is only going to kind of get harder. Let's just Memphis is going to be healthier, and maybe New Orleans is healthier next year.
Houston.
But they're also not barren of assets this summer. If they need, like, they have the Tim Hardaway Jr. expiring contract, they still have some first round equity they could trade. So as of right now, I will acknowledge that I was apparently too hard on
Me
that
too.
trade.
Me
But it's
too.
weird. Man, I didn't see the level of physicality they were going to bring, specifically with PJ Washington. I promise you, I've not seen, well, he's in the playoffs, so I've seen more of him in Dallas than in Charlotte. But I was not watching way more of PJ Washington with the Mavericks versus when he was in Charlotte. The level of just defensive physicality that he has brought is unlike anything that I remember seeing consistently from Charlotte. So maybe I underestimated him bringing that element of it. It's still in a weird spot, though, where if you ask me if I'm still making that trade, if I were the one running the Mavericks front office, I can't tell you yes right now. I guess maybe I'm not adjusting my priors enough. Maybe that's unfair. But like if they get to the conference finals and lose in 5, or it's just like, how do you view like was it worth it? But then you could also look at it. Well, look at what Luka was doing when he was banged up, and the fact that they were still able to get there. Doesn't that count for something? The
Yeah.
answer here is yes. I guess my whole point is I don't. If you had to rank the teams that are most likely to win a title of those that are left right now, I'm gonna have Boston and the Timberwolves and the Thunder and the Nuggets in front of them. So you're fifth of 8 at this point. And you know what? If you told me Cleveland was fully healthy, I might go with Cleveland above them too.
Ooh.
And so I think what my issue is that it feels like they're still missing something or someone. And maybe that's the skeleton key that is Maxi Kleba and what he can do to some of those lineups. But we've kind of seen that, like, he's not always going to be healthy. And so do you need to go out and find someone else? Am I just underestimating what they're able to do with the PJ Washington and a big type of setup? It's just like what, and it's almost, I'm criticizing myself here by just saying, what is it more that I'm looking for from this team? And I don't want to say that I don't know, but it still feels like they are a semi-significant player short of getting there, because it always feels like they're kind of making, when you're looking at their best lineups, it feels like they're still making one or two large concessions at one end of the floor where it's, this guy needs to be not even just 25 to 30% better, but needs to be like 50% more type of, like, or be a different type of player.
Yeah, I think I wonder if Luka were fully healthy, like, and in that case, like, maybe this is 3-1 Dallas, and maybe something like that. And Dallas, would have had an easier time in the first round potentially. Like, I think the calculus on judging the Washington trade, fair or not, might be different, because you'd say, like, holy, like, maybe in that scenario, Dallas isn't 5th of 8 in your title odds. It's like 3rd or 4th or something.
Good point. Great point.
It's just, it's such an interesting, I don't have an answer. It's just, I think it's a topic like we don't really talk about enough, because it's like not buzzy or not, like, I don't know. It's kind of esoteric, I guess, but it's like, at what point can you say, like, this was a team that was trying to get better in the immediate and they did it? And like, how good does that better, quote unquote, have to be for the trade to pay off? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's no right answer, because you don't know if Dallas thought this is a trade that makes us the favorite. But I also would say too, the way Dallas played and defended specifically, like down the stretch of the regular season, suggests to me that, like, they should go into next season, assuming all the principals are back and healthy, like expected to be a top 5 defense. I think, like, that should be the expectation if you proved it over that long of a stretch, and you've got Derek Lively got another year of experience, and theoretically he'll improve, and you've got another, full season of Gafford as that 2-headed monster protecting the rim, and Washington's there all year. Like, they should have a high expectation for next year. So it's not just like, everything turns back into a pumpkin after this postseason run.
Right.
You had your one shot at justifying this trade and you didn't. It's like, there's still next year. But yeah, it's such an interesting thing, because you never know. Like, I guess I got trades on the brain because that's what I've been working on a lot. But it's like, how do you decide? And when do you decide if a trade was a good one or a bad one? And Dallas is like at least making us think about it, which is
it clearly wasn't. We ethered it, and it's
yeah.
clearly like I was wrong on
Yeah.
that front, I guess. And what I was, it really feels like they need someone that just melds the concept of Tim Hardaway Jr. with Derrick Jones Jr. And it's like sort of the two-way, like three guy.
Mhm.
And it's just, yes, we know what Dante Exum and Derrick Jones Jr. are able to do at points offensively during the regular season, but like they're not super high volume when
Yeah.
it comes to it. So it always feels like they're kind of making concession at that spot, which as Kyrie gets older, I know he's defended well during these playoffs and like at points throughout the season. It's just that isn't like when Luka and Kyrie are your backcourt and you can't count on them to be exceptional defensively on a night-to-night basis. That three spot,
Yeah.
really, even with PJ Washington and Gafford are live, like I think it needs to be a better player than they have now. If you're going to win the title, I would have said if you're going to win 2 playoff rounds, that needs to be a better player. This needs to be a better setup. I was clearly wrong about that.
I wonder, like, because you mentioned Jones and Exum. I think maybe it's as simple. Like, I don't know who this player is, but just say it's Jones, because Jones brings a ton of athleticism and is defended well, but he's still someone that the opponent is going to say, if you want to get up 9 threes and you think you can make 4 or 5 of them, we will happily lose that way. Like that's just, and Exum even, Exum gets dared to shoot even more. If that player can bring most of what Jones does, like defensively, athletically, rebounding, intangibles, and also is like, we can't leave him, then that's the kind of player you're talking about, right? That whatever percentage better that is, it's like now Dallas is officially just, I don't know what you do on defense with another, like, doesn't even have to be like a premium shooter. Like if it's Jalen Williams, like if it's him instead of Derrick Jones, maybe that's all it takes.
What do you got for the Thunder? What's your biggest question for them?
That's my biggest question for the Thunder. I don't know. Well, I mean, after last night, it's like how long can you survive with Shea being the only guy that can create and make difficult shots? Like it was amazing to watch, but like I just kept possession after possession with the Thunder being unable to get into the lane for a clean look or get anything up or finish anything because Dallas is just walling off. And like it wasn't just like Giddey wasn't out there long enough to just blame him. It's like Gafford was on him some. Gafford was on Aaron Wiggins some and was like sagging and just, if Thunder, if you want to have Aaron Wiggins shoot a bunch of threes, that's scarier than Derrick Jones, but we're good with that. And we'll just wall off the paint. Like that, the Thunder have to crack that. You can't just have Shea, making, what was it? I forget, I saw the stat earlier, but it was just like, I think it was 16 2-point jump shots or something. It was like the highest we've ever seen. I'll pull it up while you're talking next, but like that's unsustainable, even for someone as great as SGA. Like that can't be the driver of your offense. So I'm curious to see if Jalen Williams can get anything going. I'm curious to see if they can just make better use of Isaiah Joe as someone to just run around and create chaos and get some spacing going.
What I think,
but I guess it's mostly offensively for the Thunder. Just maybe that's recency bias, but I need to see them figure out some other ways to score as the series goes on.
no, I think that is kind of the big question, and they do still seem at their best when they're able to get, well, at least everybody else does, when they're able to get into more of their early offense stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that could be like a greater focus. And I mean, look, that's where J-Dub has been at his best in this series. It feels like going to like those early offensive situations. Yeah. You mentioned the Joe thing, and that lineup where you're basically having him come in for Giddey has absolutely destroyed the Mavericks. I think they're like a +8. That 5 is like a +18. And no, they're a +18 in 23 minutes. And so, yeah, part of that is, okay, they're shooting 9 of 20 from 3, yada, yada, yada. But like that makes so much more sense because it's changing fundamentally the way that Dallas can defend. Since it's, I mean, like you say the same thing if you go from like Giddey to Case and Wallace, or even if you want to, like, they threw some Kenrich Williams in there. But because Isaiah Joe is so dangerous as a movement guy, it really does bend a lot of the stuff that Dallas wants to do. And I know there are probably some people that are calling like, why is Giddey even starting at this point? It's just Mark Danelin's kind of done the thing all year. It's like Giddey's going to start, and sometimes he won't start in the second half, and he's going to limit his minutes as he sees fit. I'm going to be fascinated to see how they continue to sort of juggle that, because you can just say like, yeah, he's clearly Mark Daigneault and the Thunder are clearly making a decision that's best to win. Otherwise, Giddey would be playing more if they were getting into sort of the political equity of like, this guy is supposed to be super important to our future. He's extension eligible this summer. And so that when push comes to shove, they're going to have what they deem as the best lineup on the court. But when you are struggling outside of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to generate easy offense, it's, well, do we need to go to this sooner? Do we need to go to it from the jump? Do we need to go to it more? And if we're not going to, well, then how do we kind of open up things for, I think we've seen it a lot with just looking at the quality of looks that Chet Holmgren and J-Dub are getting with Giddey on the floor versus relative to him not, or when Dallas feels like they can play off anybody, even like a case in Wallace, which made Dallas pay a couple times. You can kind of just see the material shift in the types of, maybe not even the types of looks, but the level of difficulty on them. And so I would agree with you that it kind of comes down to like, all right, how are they going to kind of run their offense here? And it's like, they haven't been, by the way, they're a 112.6 offensive rating for the series, which isn't like astronomically low, but it's like that game against Dallas felt like such a slog to get through because of how tough life was for them offensively. And it really came down to just the clamps they were able to put on Dallas defensively, which, are you able to rely on that if Luka's having a Luka game or if he's a little bit healthier or sprier in a certain matchup?
Yeah. It's so funny. Like we get so deep into the weeds, and I just circle back to like, what if Dallas made 60% of its free throws? So, we're like really trying to unpack this whole thing. And it's always little things like that. I had the stat. So SGA was 12 of 16 on mid-range shots in game 4, tying LaMarcus Aldridge for the most mid-range buckets in a playoff game over the last 10 years. So that's all to say what we just spent 8 to 10 minutes talking about. Like, the Thunder have got to find some ways to get baskets that don't involve record-setting mid-range shooting. That's the challenge ahead. Anything else on this, or should we go to the games for tonight?
I will say I feel a lot better after watching Case and Wallace on both ends of the floor, but specifically defensively. And like, yeah, sometimes he's not, sometimes he's getting bested by if he's on Kyrie, but feel really good about putting him on first team all rookie after watching him.
Yeah, I think you should feel pretty solid about that one.
Let's do Knicks Pacers. Which team?
I guess
you got a question for. I mean, it's got to be the Knicks, and it's how many bodies do they even have left? And I will say, I don't know what I don't have answers. Like, my question is just like, do they have enough to win this series? And how do you respond following a game 4 like that? That was just a basketball atrocity. But I'm looking at this team, and it's just Pacers have made some adjustments, more Aaron Nesmith on Jalen Brunson, and even just having that slightly extra length, the extra size. I think he has like 2 inches on Andrew Nembhard. Mm-hmm. It's gone really well. And then we also kind of saw that Nembhard was tracking Dante DiVincenzo more, which took him, it looked like, out of the element in game 4. How do the Knicks respond to that? But the bigger thing is I think it's 15.3% of their shots are coming late in the shot clock, between 7 and 4 seconds left. Now, if you include 0 to 4 seconds, that shoots up to like almost 30%. I think it's like 27 something percent of their shots are coming early and late, ultra late in the shot clock. Those two combined, that is by far and away would have been the largest share during the regular season. And there are just too many possessions right now where you're watching them, and they don't even, especially if Jalen Brunson's not in the game or if he's not handling the ball, it took them 17 seconds to get inside the 3-point line. Or look, that entire possession went by. It wasn't like an early offensive possession where they got a shot up. It was 21 seconds ticked off the clock, and they didn't even get inside the 3-point line. And I'm watching Jalen Brunson, and if he, summons just something from the depths of whatever he has left after playing all these minutes and playing hurt, and has some of that jiggle joggle to put the Pacers defense back on tilt, I don't know the solve. I think the Knicks can play better defensively. I think when you look at the personnel, like, they are built to play better defensively than they did, obviously, in game 4. Like, the just level of intensity wasn't there, but you knew they were down bad when Josh Hart needed a rest in game 4. And it's just like, I don't want to oversimplify this because we've been driving it home throughout the entire playoffs, but are they running out of bodies? Are they running out of stamina? And look, maybe it works in their favor that, some of the starters were kind of in pretty late in game 4. You know what? Because the Knicks are running out of bodies. And like, you can't just like, emptying your bench means what?
Yeah.
So I I know that I still picked it. I don't move off my picks. We saw some of this in the Nuggets thing. I got Nuggets responses, which, by the way, Nuggets fans, like, we were wondering if they were broken. Like, absolutely take your victory lap. Neither of us picked them to lose the series. We just said we were more uneasy. So I won't move off my pick. I just don't do that. Like, I'll adjust what I'm thinking. But the more I'm watching this team, I'm just like, how do you pick them to win this series right now? You could say they've responded to adversity all year, but we're reaching critical mass here, where it's not just the adversity they're facing, but the toll that it has taken on the players who are actively still in the game. And just without OG Anunoby specifically, like, one, the backbone of their defense, the nervous system to it all. And then just like the minutes these guys have been playing, then the injured Jalen Brunson. And there is, this is the one thing. Here's a little aside of an anecdote. I cannot stand it's. I understand that there are different levels of fandom, but I'm at Mother's Day brunch. Well, my family hosted it. And I'm speaking with, they don't listen to this podcast, so I'm just going to put them on blast. One of my brother-in-laws saying he doesn't like Jalen Brunson, always has the ball, doesn't like his attitude. And I'm trying to explain to him.
I can picture you like crawling out of your skin trying.
There were other things said as well that I need to bite my lip about, as you know full well, but this was just strictly basketball. And I'm trying to explain to him, first of all, you can't ascribe a player's play style to attitude. It's like ascribing Tobias Harris makes this much and he's not playing well, so he's a terrible human being. Like, you don't get from like point A to point Z like that. I'm trying to explain to him, they don't have anyone else. Like, and I tried to point out a possession. I was like, look, Jalen Brunson didn't touch the ball there, and the Knicks didn't get inside the 3-point line. Yeah. And he just dismissed it. Like, so that's what this team is like. It's literally just, I know what people think about Josh Hart in the early offense and in transition. I know what Isaiah Hartenstein can do. I know what Dante DiVincenzo can do on, like, he has some certain pop on possessions. Jalen Brunson is the only their second best from scratch creator right now is Alec Burks.
Right.
That's not okay.
That's where we are. That's where we are. Jokic is obviously the answer, but if you exclude him, you could have come into this playoff saying, is there another player who is more singularly important to his team's success than Brunson? Right?
I'm glad that when you said Jokic is the answer, and I was like, to what this team needs. I was like, where's he going with this question?
That was all. I think the Knicks need Jokic. They should trade for him. What do you think? Did discuss?
Yeah. No, right, I'm not. Look, I'm not breaking up the Villanova squad for Nikola Jokic.
Did he go to Villanova? Oh, I'm sorry. Get Chris Jenkins or who? That's who made the shot, right? No, because it's like you said, there just isn't. It's not just that the Knicks are losing bodies and guys are breaking down. It's that they came into this postseason hobbled as it was. Like, Julius Randle is by no means like the kind of shot creator you ideally want on a playoff team. But for the Knicks, like, hey, we'll take it, because if it's not him, then it's beggars can't be choosers. Like, we'll take
it. Was OG Anunoby, and everyone was excited. Yes, he had the game of his life. Well, I will say, before he got injured.
Yeah, no, like, he can do a little
bit, and then miss that finish.
Yeah, he can do a little bit. OG could, but that just illustrates the point of, like, if you're at a place where OG Anunoby's individual offensive creation is actually very important to your success, like, that's a pretty clear signal that you are short on shot creation. And like, if Brunson, again, I hate this, but like, it's kind of like Dallas with Luka. It's like, how do you discuss the series in any way without starting with, well, this guy is beyond critical. Like, if Brunson, I saw a stat, I didn't know they could do this. I think it's Second Spectrum or some kind of tracking software that said, well, Brunson's jumping an average of like 2 inches lower on his pull-ups or on his shot attempts. And it's just like, as an indicator of like, yeah, which like, no shit, he's obviously injured and hurt and like not 100%. But like, if he can't be just a 40-point guy, then what are we talking about? Like, because you can't get, it's like Dante DiVincenzo has exceeded expectations. He was clearly tired, as was everybody else, but like, he was gassed in game 4, and like, he's not a shot creator. That just isn't what he does. And so like, neither is Josh Hart. Hartenstein's a good passer. Like, maybe we just start running the offense through him if you're the Knicks. I don't know. We're overcomplicating it, I think, to a pretty significant degree if we get too far beyond. How's Brunson looking?
Like, what if Deuce McBride plays like he has a pulse again on offense? Because like, that's sure. But it is fair. I hate that so many, well, not so many, but I guess, so many, 3 of these series, I kind of dismiss the Cavaliers boss. Like, yes, Cleveland's missing. I don't want to dismiss it. The Cavs are a good team, but like so many of these series are just, we're going to look back and say, was this just a war of attrition? Because, one of the 3 best players in the world in the Dallas OKC series was clearly not healthy. A player who finished top 5 on the MVP ballot in Pacers Knicks wasn't healthy. And look, hey, they were already missing their second most important shot creator. And then they were missing, I guess you'd call him your second most important center at this point, but he was your starting center at the beginning of the year. And that's, their most important defender just went down. And then Cavs Celtics. They're missing 2 of their 4 best players in game 4, and they've missed Jared Allen for what does he miss now? Since the end of was it just game 7 he missed against Orlando, or he missed more time than that? It doesn't matter. They miss him
for at least one, might have been 2, but yeah, he's been out the whole series.
So it's just like, I hate that. Like, thank God for Timberwolves Nuggets, which we'll get into in a second. Right. So there's no point in overcomplicating for the Knicks. I do think I've seen a lot of, like the Knicks, like now they can run it back and like everyone gets healthier. And I will say, you read into this and you look at it and you say, if you want to run it back, you need to be damn sure that you think Julius Randle is the missing shot creator type you needed. And the answer to that, by the way, is no, he's not. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm at. I think he did a good job kind of blending in more in the larger picture this year. They're not one Julius Randle away from kind of playoff proofing their offense. It's just, I'm sorry, if they're not there. And so you need to take that. I think it might be even harder to understand that because of what's going on with Jalen Brunson right now. And even just because of the success, like the lineup with OG Anunoby and Hartenstein and Brunson, and I think is it DiVincenzo and Hart, like they absolutely destroyed the Pacers in the minutes they played before OG went down. So that's something you need to remember. Unless you had anything else to add on the Knicks, what's kind of your biggest question here for Indiana?
For the Knicks, I would just one more. I think Achua needs to play a lot more.
Fuck. Look, here's what needs to happen with Achua. He can play more. Don't start games and then keep Jericho Sims all the way from this series. This is not the matchup for him. So I guess I didn't mean to dismiss that. But like, we don't need to start Preston like that. We're done. Like that paves the way for you to that, or you need to play him way more so that you don't lean on a Jericho, because this isn't the Jericho Sims series. Like it just clear the way the Pacers space the floor and like even just some of the lines they can run with the bench, right? So,
I mean, and to be fair to Sims, he is like the 4th big on this team, so he shouldn't be playing.
If we're getting into, like, you need to play Precious Achua more. Yeah. Like, what are we doing here?
No, Jalen Brunson's secondary importance. Achua needs 40 minutes. That's just the fact. For the Pacers, I mean, I don't know. I will just say, I just love the Aaron Nesmith experience. It's kind of one of my favorite role players all year. He's like, I had the thought of watching him play because like he will make the odd like bad foul, or he'll like run his guy over or like knock into someone accidentally. He's like a missile. You know how like missiles have like the 4 fins like on the back to like keep it steady? That's like he's like one of those, which means he's really fast and destructive, but like he's missing one of those, so it kind of wobbles as it goes, but it's still, he's just like, his athleticism is always turned all the way up, and but it's like not always like in a perfect straight line and that's almost a good thing for like really intense defense against someone like Brunson, because he's just like all over the place. He's all arms and legs. He's super physical and kind of reckless and kind of dangerous seeming. And that's like what you want on a smaller guard, if you can get it. And the fact that moving Nembhard somewhere else didn't really hurt Indy, because maybe just because DiVincenzo was exhausted, and maybe because Nembhard's just better suited to guard someone like him. Pretty encouraging. I just, I don't know where else to go based off game 4, just because this thing was over, like, I don't know, at the 25-minute mark. I mean, maybe before that, maybe the 20-minute mark, it was fairly well decided. It was a 20-point game in the first quarter. Like, I don't know. How much credit do you give the Pacers, for being where they are, versus like how much are we just going to acknowledge that the Knicks are falling apart?
You have to give them a ton of credit, because I know that the Knicks are banged up. Like this team was down 2-0 and very well could have been down 3-0 based off like towards the ending of game 3, which was tight. And it was, I don't know if we recorded since that podcast, but I think I texted this to you and it said, it felt like, as odd as it sounds, that the Knicks needed that game.
Yeah.
Just to give themselves a margin for error that was more doable. And so I give a ton of credit to Indy, and I'm again, the adjustments they've made defensively, I think have absolutely impacted the Knicks, and injuries I'm sure have helped it. But like the other thing that I've really appreciated, and I'm wondering if they need to it's counterintuitive because it involves maybe staggering Tyrese Haliburton and Pascal Siakam even more. But there are these kind of bench heavy mobs that they're running out, and they're just nuking the Knicks in these small samples. And the two lineups that stand out to me have played a total of 13 minutes in this series, and they've outscored the Knicks by 21 total points. And so there's the TJ McConnell, Miles Turner, Obi Toppin, Halliburton, Ben Shepherd unit that we've seen in a couple games. And then there's the TJ McConnell, Pascal Siakam, Aaron Nesmith, Isaiah Jackson, Ben Shepherd unit that we've also seen in a couple games. And like those two combinations, and even like throw the what's been one of the more like the McConnell, Siakam, Toppin, Jackson, and Shepherd 1-2. Like those, you've gotten to these starter light, 1-star bencher heavy mobs that have been able to just really take the Knicks down. And I don't necessarily, is it because you're playing even faster, or is it like, I think you're better suited in some of those units. And maybe it's, especially when you're yanking Turner off the court and you're throwing some Jackson, like, are you just better suited to rumble with the Knicks on the glass? That's the other thing that they've done. I know that the Knicks have, like, you look at the Knicks offensive rebounding rate and it's, oh, okay, it's at 30% for this series. That's high, but it's also not super high for the Knicks to relative to they play. And fun fact, Indiana has more second chance points than the Knicks right now in this series. So it's, again, the offensive rebounding rate, there's difference like on that, but you're winning that battle. So I guess my one question for the Pacers is, are they able to like keep this up and take advantage of the situation that they've done? And my answer almost is yes, like to answer my own question, because you've seen some of the adjustments that they've made. And I'm very curious to see what kind of happens if they get punched in the mouth, where it's game 5, or if in a game 6 or something. And is there room to see more of these? Again, it's counterintuitive because you should want Halliburton and Siakam on the court at the same time. But like these bench mobs, and they're not strictly just going up against the Knicks bench, because the Knicks don't play their bench because they don't have a bench right now. They're absolutely like slaughtering these dudes during those minutes.
Yeah, I feel like, not to turn it back on the Knicks a little bit, but it's related. Like, I definitely came into the postseason thinking what TJ McConnell has done during the regular season is nice, but like there's going to be ways to make it so you just, as the Pacers, cannot lean on McConnell for as much as he played during the season. And like, you could almost make him a detriment, right? You would think like he doesn't want to shoot threes, and he's the size disadvantage is like you could finagle some offensive sets where you're getting a bigger guy on him, but the Knicks just like aren't built to do anything to exploit like other teams' weaknesses right now, if you think about it, because like they play like fairly like-sized guards, between DiVincenzo, Brunson, and Hart. I mean, Hart's not really a guard, but he's 6'4", 6'5". And so it's not like you can so easily like, let's get McConnell switched on to like a big that can punish him with size. It's like, okay, so Precious Achua is now going to attack McConnell on us. Like, that's not. So I think credit to Indy for just like getting away with playing guys that in normal circumstances you might be like less inclined to put out there in a postseason series because of the way they might get exploited. And credit to the Pacers for just like, they're still running. They're still, I mean, if anything, like this is the wrong series for a tired team to be playing, right? Because the Pacers still are just going to get X number of just runouts on made baskets because guys are tired on the other team. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, like if you're Indiana, well, it feels so trite to say because it's game 5 and it's tied 2-2. I still feel like it's a more important game for the Knicks to win, because if the Knicks somehow are rested and get this one, then you can lay another egg and you still get another shot. Game 7, home court, best of 3 series right now, obviously. But like if Indiana can get this one, man, like I'll be so impressed, because I don't know. I didn't think that Siakam was a good enough second, star. I didn't think that a lot of Indy's players would be like up to the challenges of the postseason. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to have a lot of notes for the Pacers after like a game that was spent mostly with 30
one of the questions I thought I might have is, how do we make sure that Tyrese Halliburton stays higher volume on the offensive end? And like, he's done that basically the past 3 games. There's still pockets of time when he's on the court and it feels like he's not. But they've definitely gotten progressively smaller, and he's now turned in a handful of just really good games. So that's not even a question for them at this point. I was even thinking, like, what would the Pacers do if the Knicks kind of change the way that they're defending Halliburton? And I'm kind of just looking at like, what else are like, who is the guy that you're deciding to say, oh, do they need to have more Deuce McBride on Tyrese Halliburton? Like, what is that? What is that even doing?
I think from the Pacers side, if you're, more of a from a standpoint of more of like, how do they like stick the knife in? Like Siakam was 7 of 9 in game 4. And the more often the Knicks go with McBride as like the fourth guy instead of Achua, like Siakam can just go to work in like the mid post and on the elbows. And if you get him on one of those smaller guys in a pick and roll, like Siakam is someone that really should have like at some point before this series is over, based on how the Knicks, like how limited their options are in terms of like wing size, he should be able to have like a monster game or two. I would think it might, it just seems like he has such an advantage with his length, and like all he's got to do is take 2 hard dribbles and spin, and then he's 6 feet away and there's a 6'4" guy on him. Like, it just seems like that's somewhere that the Pacers could really go to much more often. Just because the Knicks don't have the personnel to like do anything about it, really. Like I'm surprised Siakam hasn't had like a super kick-ass game, at least, once in the last couple, just with the Knicks game.
I've actually kind of wondered why they haven't used him to go after Jalen Brunson more on defense, to where, and maybe it's part of it because who Jalen Brunson is predominantly going to guard, it's going to be Aaron Nesmith or Andrew Nembhard, but it's like, just have those dudes screen for Siakam then. And I know the Knicks don't like to switch, but maybe is that going to force? And if they're switching, like, are they going to try and do, scram or peel switching, and then it's going to complicate matters and you bust up the defense that way? That's something that I kind of thought about, could they do? But I'm almost just like, it really feels like the key to what the Pacers do is that when they're playing so fast, not only is that kind of exhausting the Knicks' stores, but like they're just not, you've seen the Knicks defense, it feels like the past few games get progressively more confused when it comes to not even in game 4 was its own beast, like very early on, but just like you can kind of see where the matchups just aren't where they're not supposed to be, or they're just not set. And so it feels like that is more of a collective key to what Indy is doing. And it's not even a question, because it's just like, that's just ingrained. It's more of a question for the Knicks is, well, how do you slow down the Pacers? And it's make shots so you can get your defense set. Right. And right now they're just not built to make shots in the half court on a consistent basis. And then you could say, well, if they're getting, we did talk about this, there's a duality here. Well, if you start to get up and down the floor faster, one, what is that doing to Brunson's leg? And two, that's Indy's strength. Like, that's like, so if you're not going to be hyper efficient, you're just going to put yourself in a more compromising position, because Indy's going to either come off of a turnover or a live rebound and get the push out of that situation.
Yeah. It's like the Knicks are at the risk of like having a really nasty feedback loop where like you can't score, and so there's a bunch of live ball rebounds and they run the other way, which tires you out, which makes it harder for you to score, which creates more live. It's just like, how do you pull out of that tailspin? It's going to be tough. But I do think, I don't know, this may not matter, I do think the Knicks are going to win game 5. That's if I had to guess.
Way to date the podcast, Grant. God, 72 minutes into it, you're always doing that.
That's, I just have to be honest.
Speaking of dating the podcast, let's start with the Nuggets, who I was beyond impressed with. I don't know how I felt. I think I was more morbidly curious with a degree of nervousness, because I didn't want this series to devolve into a shit show where if they would have lost game 3, it's just, well, this is I want a competitive series. We have these other 3 series where there's so many people injured, and it's only gotten worse in most cases. So the way they responded in games 3 and 4 on the road is just like, okay, like this kind of, not that we needed to be reminded that these were the reigning champs, but a lot of people pointed this out and they were right. I will not diminish them going and winning the title last year. I think people who do that don't recognize that they were the only great team in the Western Conference. Okay, the Western Conference only had one great team. It was them, and that's why they won the way that they did. Now, this season, they've already been, I think Minnesota is the toughest test of that they faced over the past, and it's not even close. I think you could argue in both postseasons, it was the toughest test. For them to come back like they did, and to see like the functional adjustments that they're making of just, Jamal Murray has made some tough shots, but they also feel like they don't, I would have to go look at the possession time, which I'm just not inclined to do, and it's a game by game basis. Like, they're not having the ball in his hands from the jump as much. It's more of Nikola Jokic being aggressive, or it's more of, we're putting the ball in Aaron Gordon's hands, because this is going to force, like, you can't hide. Well, you can. It forces the Timberwolves this awkward decision where it's, okay, we'll still press Aaron Gordon, but then like we kind of need to hand him off to Rudy Gobert once he gets there, and that's not great. And then, okay, we could defend Jokic straight up. And look, I think Rudy Gobert has defended Jokic straight up incredibly physically, which is to say, well, it doesn't fucking matter when Nikola Jokic is in the mindset of, I'm going to take these shots. He hits tough shots. I don't want to boil it down to Nikola Jokic decided to be a scorer, and that's what happens. When Nikola Jokic takes tough shots, they're not always easy. They're physical. He's using all these different, like, you look at him under the basket, and sometimes you can't, like, is he going to go up? It's like he will miss a shot, grab his own board without having he doesn't need a second jump so much. It's just like he's just there. He's just going to grab it. The dude is both physical, crafty, has this level of finesse, but you've seen a shift in how the Nuggets are playing. And I really appreciate that. It even feels like, and which I think is smart, like they've changed the way they're defending Anthony Edwards. And part of that has been, all right, like it's not just not like it's playing Christian Brown sometimes at the expense of Michael Porter Jr.'s minutes, because like we know that Christian Brown can hold up against some of these defensive assignments more. Just a masterclass, I think, in not losing their composure after for the series and just making these. I don't even think that I think that what's really wild is that these aren't subtle adjustments, is that they feel more, maybe they are subtle in like, I'm not an NBA head coach, but like they're real adjustments to where it's something that you could argue, well, why would they get away from this? Yeah, we've seen more Jokic Murray 2-man action. It feels like they even want to slow it down a little bit more. That's where they're most comfortable. They were a little bit too sped up through those first 2 games, but it's like what you're doing with Aaron Gordon.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, that's a material adjustment. And so I give them kudos to not getting, I don't want to say stuck in their ways, but to be willing to make an adaptation that is, if it's not stark, it's significant enough that I don't think it's a guarantee other teams would have made it.
I think that's really interesting. I remember I'll keep notes in my phone, like as I'm watching games, just like throughout the course of the year, like just some thought I'll have that I know I'm not going to remember. And one of the ones I made, I don't know, it could have been like December or something, was Jokic always has the last word tactically. Like so like whatever you think is going to work against Jokic, he will have the last word in that exchange. Like he will counter it, and then you won't have a counter to the counter, and he wins. Like that, whether that's defensive coverage, whether that's the types of shots you want to make him take. I think what games 3 and 4 have shown is that it's not just Jokic, like that applies to. It's Denver as a whole. And it's again, like, how do you ever evaluate this stuff? But I think it's a lot of Michael Malone too, because like it would have been really easy to let this series get away after that 0-2 hole for like a number of reasons, like from a motivational perspective, or from like you push the wrong buttons, you panic a little bit, you make the adjustment you think is going to work and it doesn't. But it just feels like the Gordon thing in particular is huge. That like Denver, I think, is showing now that it as a unit is going to have the last word tactically. Like it will make the last adjustment and put you back on your heels and force you to say, okay, what do we do against that now? And it feels like the Wolves may not have a great counter to the counter. Like we've seen the series shift now, and I don't know what needs to happen for Minnesota to shift it back. Maybe that will happen. Like it's hard to be super confident because neither of us foresaw the Wolves winning the first 2 games, and like nobody saw that. So we don't have a great grasp on the series, like from the jump, pretty obviously. The other thing, I think, just macro, because I think you definitely hit on like some of the key specifics of it, but big picture, I think you said it last time we talked, you root for chaos, which like the Wolves beating Denver for the first 2 games and seemingly putting a stranglehold on the series was chaos. And it was awesome because it was like, what? Like everything is in disarray league wide. Denver was our pick. Like, this is awesome. Unless you're a Denver fan, like this is the most fun it could be. Watching Denver come back and win games 3 and 4 reminded me that what I actually like even more than the chaos is when greatness says like, hold on, like we will decide what happens here. And I think that's a symptom of coming up as a basketball fan, like during the second Bulls three-peat, where they'd be down and Jordan would just be like, nope, I'm going to find a way to win this game, whether it's the flu game or just whatever, or, the last sequence against Utah with the steal and the jumper on Brian Rutt, like greatness just finds a way. And I think that like formed me as like one of the formative things of my basketball fandom, and seeing a team I think is great and a player I think is great, just reassert like, this is what it looks like which is what Denver's doing, is fucking awesome. Like I love the response. I love how good they looked in games 3 and 4. I love that, like, just now going forward, it feels like Minnesota is really on its heels because Edwards had friggin' 44 points in game 4 and it just wasn't like close to enough. It made me read. We like chaos. I like chaos. I love seeing like something special, just like certify that it's special. And that feels like what we got in games 3 and 4.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. And I guess if you were asking for like a question with Denver, because now it's like they're back to being that kind of no notes team.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I would almost kind of focus on what, by the way, recognizing from kind of the jump that this needed to be a Justin Holiday series and not a Peyton Watson series. I mean, that's amazing. But you also kind of have to wonder, like, is he going to continue to shoot 62.5% from 3?
Yeah.
Like he's 10 of 16 for the series, I think. Something wild like that. So
he missed 2 in game 4, so I've really dragged his number.
So he's already fallen off.
Yeah.
So I just but again, like that would probably be my question. And it's, do you get to a point where, because of how you like to run your offense and like you've been playing from more, I mean, look, they use the in game 4, that 28-4 run where it was kind of like you show that you could punch them out. But if it's later, does that have to change how the way they run their rotations at all? Does it limit what you could do with Christian Brown because he's giving you some offense, but he's not necessarily a floor spacer? He's a great mover off of it.
Mm-hmm.
But you also kind of need him because you had to change the way that you were defending Anthony Edwards. And a lot of that is KCP. By the way, we talk about Murray's calf strain. KCP's dealing with an ankle issue. And that would probably be my other biggest question, is that how do you overcome, because we even saw it in game 4 where there's just like, there's pockets of time where Murray doesn't look like Murray or isn't playing too well.
Mm-hmm.
What if you get another game where that's the case, or games?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you respond to that? That's kind of my question with them. If you don't have anything else on the Nuggets, I do have, like, what is your biggest question for Minnesota for the rest of the series?
I mean, like, it's definitely got us, well, just in terms of like nuts and bolts, like, how are we gonna handle the Gobert, Aaron Gordon, like, interplay? Because I think you said it was so successful in the first couple of games is Gobert being able to kind of rove a little bit and be there as a second defender, or to pick Jokic up if he needs to, and someone else will recover out to Gordon. And so far as the Wolves are even interested in doing that, if he's beyond the arc, like it is, what's the adjustment to the adjustment? So let's assume that Gordon does more ball handling and is forcing Gobert or whatever, forcing the Wolves to not do what they wanted to do. Like, what is Minnesota's move? Like, how do you put Cat out there now? And because Cat has quietly, not quietly, but like we haven't really discussed him at all, had a really rough game 4. Like, I just don't know what the tactical switch is there. And then I think too, like, somebody beside, and this may just be Cat, like, it can't just be Edwards making tough shots or breaking down the defense on his own and finishing layups, which he does like so easily. I can't understand it sometimes how he's able to just get layups out of isolation against the set defense. I don't know. I think the guy that needs to play really well on both ends, and that might mean he's also covering Gordon a little bit more, is Towns, because he's got to be able to supplement Edwards scoring. Maybe some pick and roll, some Cat Edwards pick and rolls, however you want to structure those, would be good. I don't know. I guess it's just like the biggest question for the Minnesota is like, how do you get your feet back on the ground after being up 2-0 and then seeing Denver like hit another level that you couldn't match for 2 games?
Yeah. And I'm wondering, could an adjustment be, and we saw it a little bit in game 4, do you go 3 bigs and like you're kind of just banking on, well, then you can have Naz Reid do the Gordon thing, and you could still try to figure out ways to then have Rudy Gobert on the have Towns on Jokic, and then you hope. But again, who's Rudy Gobert on? So it's just, I guess it depends on, so if they have Brown in there instead of Michael Porter Jr., like during those minutes, maybe that's something you look at. Or at this point, with the way he's been shooting, is it just like KCP becomes that guy? I'm just wondering if it's worth trying that. I'll be very interested to see if there are any more wholesale adjustments there. You mentioned Cat is a really good one where, okay, there's the blowout. He only takes 7 shots. There's a very inefficient game. in game 4? The answer is like, who else are you expecting to level up
Yeah.
your offense? We've seen the half court offense fall off since, the first 2 games. It's been the opposite with Denver, where they were averaging like 0.89 points in the half court during those first 2 games. And again, it feels like to me that they're going with their bread and butter of Murray and Jokic, but they've also kind of like allowed themselves to slow down, where it feels like they were trying to actively, or at least Murray was maybe trying to actively make quicker decisions, or Jokic was trying to get rid of the ball. And now over the past 2 games, Denver has a half court offensive rating of 1.18 per possession, that's high, especially in
They'll
half
do it.
court. That's pretty
They'll
high.
do it.
But yeah, with Minnesota, it's Towns is just such a fascinating player, especially when it comes to the postseason, just the peaks and valleys that he's able to explore. But if it's not going to be him, are we really sitting here saying, okay, well then, we need Naz Reid to really step up and drop 20 points a game, when it feels like, the Timberwolves are kind of worried about how he's going to hold up on defense against Denver's peak offense. And after that, it's okay. Well, then we'll just, 36-year-old Mike Conley. Or after that, it's like, is it Nikola Alexander? Well, it has to be Towns. And I don't know what it's really a matter of either, is how do you go about getting Towns? The volume is one thing, but how do you go about getting him, I guess more volume, but to be more consistently present on the offensive end?
Yeah, it's hard. Like he's one of the, I know we overreact to every game in the series, or at least I do, where it's like, if team X wins, it's like impossible for me to imagine how team Y is ever going to win a game in the series. When Cat has a bad game, it's just like, I can't ever imagine how he's going to be effective going forward. Like, because his bad looks bad. Like, it's the wayward drives, the out of control stuff, the passes to nobody. Like, when he doesn't look right, it's so conspicuous. But like, he's still someone that you got to be able to get. He's got to be, how many he got? I guess he got up 4 threes in 38 minutes in game 4. I need Cat shooting like 8 or 9 threes just to like maybe
all this time,
just unclog the offense a little bit, right? Like that's always seemed like one of the easier fixes for a Wolves offense that has been its weakest link for all year. It's just like, see what happens if Cat gets up 10 threes in a game or whatever. I know that's easier said than done, obviously, but like, if you're looking for fixes, it's like you said, it's got to come from him either getting downhill with an advantage or just spacing out to where the guys on him can't, feel comfortable. I was fascinated by the big lineups that the Wolves used a little bit in game 4. Like I just wonder, while there will be some payoffs, like if you have too many bigger, slower, relatively speaking, guys on the floor, is that just kind of begging Jokic to just pick you apart as his smaller teammates are moving around off the ball and getting into space? And like, it's just harder for big guys to, one, navigate screens, they get hung up, and 2, just to move as quickly. Like I would expect, if the Wolves go bigger, because they had, like, I can't even remember what it was. It must have been Gobert, Towns, Reed, Edwards, and like Alexander Walker or McDaniels was the one that they had out there in game 4 for a while. And it was just like, every guy on the floor is enormous and just physical. I think if you do that too much as the Wolves, you might end up getting burned by it. It might not be as valuable defensively as you think if the Nuggets can space it out and just like kind of cut it to pieces. But
I might try. So the lineup you're talking about was Edwards and McDaniels.
Yeah,
with the 3 bigs. I might try it.
I would do it too, because you sort of have to try it, but I would also be really ready to pull the ripcord if you get back cut like 3 times in a row type of stuff. But yeah, that's the thing. One of the other ways to go, though, is just a bunch more Conley Gobert, like high pick and roll or so, things like that. But then you need Conley out there, because that might be one of the other ways you can score. I think it's going to be the type of thing where the Wolves just have to like try both of those things and several other things. And whichever one starts to work for a while, just run it into the ground and hope it gets you enough to pay off in the end.
I will also say the other question I have for the Wolves is, can they regain control of the non-Jokic minutes, of which there aren't going to be many, but they were actually worse during non-Jokic minutes, and it had to do with like one mini stretch. Like, that's how these things work. The entire thing, when you look at the minutes Jokic isn't playing, is a mini stretch. But they ended up getting outscored by 5 points when Nikola Jokic was off the court in game 4, which is worse than what it was in game 3, where I
Yeah.
think they still won the non-Jokic minutes, if I remember correctly. Like, that's just, I understand that you want to mirror certain looks of your lineups, like at that point, but at the same time, I mean, if you're getting, I'm trying to think of what the lineup was that was blitzing them. I think it was Murray, Gordon, Holiday, Porter, and Brown. If that lineup is going through like this 2 or 3 minute stretch and they're just, outscoring you by like 9 or 10 points, whatever it ends up, like that can't, like those are precious. Like it's the same way if you're the Nuggets and you're looking at, okay, Anthony Edwards is off the court. That is precious time
Yeah.
that you cannot afford to squat. Like at least play it to a dead even, because sometimes, yes, there's going to be the dual star looks. Like, I mean, like the dual stars, they'll be out at the same time, but it's just sort of, you're looking at Anthony Edwards plays 40.5 minutes a game. Those 7.5 minutes he's off the court, those are big for the Denver Nuggets. Nikola Jokic is at like 40 minutes a game for this. So it's like you can't, especially when there's other, like the way that Jokic is playing himself. I don't know necessarily what the answer is. Do you just mirror saying, you know what, like, do we completely flip flop it where it's okay, we'll pull like Gobert off the court during that time, but we want, like we're going to play everyone else. Like that's going to be Edwards, Conley, Towns, Reed, who's your McDaniel. Like, do you just put out your best non-Gobert 5 during that stretch to say, our goal here is to create some separation or at least bridge the gap? I like, is that stupid to even suggest?
I love it, because I think like if you're putting together the list of what absolutely must happen for us to beat the Nuggets while they're playing well, it's like you got to be plus 10 in like the 4 to 8 minutes Jokic isn't on the floor, because you're not winning the other minutes, most likely, if the Nuggets are going well. So like, however you do, like, what if you just turn those stretches into like the most high variance portion of the game, where all you do is come in and like, let's get up, if it's a 3-minute stretch, let's get up a 3 like every time down. Let's just hunt space, hunt threes, run it like crazy. Like, just hope that you can go, you get your plus 8 in those 3 minutes, and maybe you get another section of plus 2 or 3. Like, you can't, that's a must, because you aren't, history suggests you are not winning the Jokic on minutes as the Wolves. Like, you're just, or anybody else, like you can't do it. So you have to find the advantage in that tiny window, and whatever you need to do to exploit it, like you gotta, cause yeah, like Denver did have lineups out there and has had lineups out there during the series where it's like, how is this a functional offense? Cause it'll be Brown and it'll be like, they're just, maybe it's a hobbled Murray and like 4 other guys that aren't going to create shots.
It happened. I think one, like Reggie Jackson was involved. It's like, okay, like this can't be like, this is like,
yeah, that is the lowest hanging fruit of any series against the Nuggets. And you just have to pick all of it. And I don't know, if the Wolves, maybe that's just the barometer. Like, if the Wolves can win those minutes handily, that's going to offset the bulk of the minutes of the game, which you aren't going to probably win. I don't know. This series is still, would you say this is the most interesting series still? Like,
Mavericks because of what kind of interesting, but I think you can make a case that, I think some people have made the case, and I just won't go there because I have a ton of respect for Boston and Oklahoma City specifically, that this is basically the NBA Finals playing out. It's just such a slugfest here. And there's so much like weird noise that isn't necessarily injury related, because you're looking at it and it's the Nuggets like primary baseline, like their starting 5, I believe, has been outscored for this series still. And so it's like, it's almost like, well, how are the Wolves like not even up by even more there? So and like the Wolves' own starting lineup is like this huge plus for the series. So there's just a lot of weird like noise there. So I do think this is the most interesting series, and I think it's the one where my whims have shifted game to game more than most other series too. I think maybe the Knicks might be an example, like when you're losing like a starter a game, basically, is what it feels like that's just gonna happen.
Yeah, I think again, you're always trying to learn something about like how to approach things next time. Even so, let's make a pledge. Next time something like this happens where the Wolves are up, a team like the Wolves that isn't supposed to is up 2-0 on a team like Denver, which isn't supposed to fall behind by 2-0, we don't freak out. Because I just thought, I really didn't think like, I mean, I thought that it would still be a series, but it's like, how do you come back from losing the first 2 games at home?
If either of us said, which I don't think we did, that they were absolutely going to lose the series, we said, or that they looked like they were broken. And then, you know what? Because we're the number one media property in the world, they might have listened, heard that, and that's what prompted Nikola Jokic to send the team text.
Yeah.
And they deserved all the criticism for that lifeless ass performance they
their coach gave it to him worse than we did, like in the media.
If we sat here and said there's no chance they were winning, then yes, we were wrong. We don't normally, I at least don't adjust my playoff predictions like that. So,
well, I think I have a memory of saying, it's like, as we were getting out of the conversation about them after game 2, I think I said, like, Minnesota probably wins this, right? And like, I don't know if that goes as far as saying, like,
if we said that, we were wrong and we're sorry, but I have
obviously.
hashtag no regrets.
Yeah,
they deserve to be crucified after that game 2 performance. But game 1, close, competitive, you lose, it happens. Game 2 was bullshit.
I just I'll get all the way back to my favorite point about this whole series is, like, it's pretty awesome when a really great team just decides we're not going to let this happen. And it's tied 2-2, so maybe, like, the last word has not been issued on this.
Series where you've kind of, I guess, would Indy and New York be the second most one where you've seen them kind of deviate from, I don't want to call them core principles, but maybe they've deviated from, this is how we're entering the series and we're going to try to do this, and then we're just going to completely shift it. I'm trying to think, like, what other series would be like this? Definitely not Thunder Mavs. That's feels almost formulaic.
Not in this postseason. I think you go back a ways, it's like, teams will switch starters, and take guys out of the rotation and stuff like that. That's like, we haven't had anything quite like that. But yeah, this, I mean, look, and that's the reason this series has tilted so drastically, right? Is like, you had 2 games where one team looked unbeatable, and then 2 more where things changed significantly strategically, and, like, I guess from a give a shit standpoint. And, like, now it's completely the other way, and it's all square. And the series is awesome. Give me more of these forever.
Non-playoff related thing, Grant. I don't know if you know this, but the Atlanta Hawks won the 2024 NBA draft lottery despite entering with the 10th best odds of doing so. We also saw Houston ends up with the number 3 pick. We also saw a few media companies, not this one, were bad at math and said that the Pistons basically got fucked when statistically they're just basically right where they should be at number 5. Neither of us are like, I've started to get shin deep into draft prep because I had to write a little bit about it. We're not going to talk about the prospects here, other than I do have a question about it being so wide open, but I really think these tied 2 together. Does the Hawks winning the draft lottery set the stage for more collective chaos, or is this a situation where it just kind of made Atlanta's own decision tougher because we have talked about them as a team that could look to, do they move Murray or Young? Would they consider moving both? Like, are they going to look to maybe even buy? Does this make that decision even harder because now you have the number 1 pick, and so it's not just a matter of, oh, okay, we're going to move Murray and be done, or is that still what it is because you owe your first round pick? Your San Antonio controls your first, basically 25, 26, and 27.
Yeah, so everything we could possibly discuss about Atlanta specifically, or the draft lottery itself, is complicated by the fact that nobody thinks this draft is any good.
I have it on good authority that people around the league, and I told you this before we started, that they think there are 5 players that could realistically go number 1. Now, 'tis the season for noise, and just based off the little that I know, I just feel like who's ever at 1 should pick Alex R and move on. Mm-hmm. But that's not, like, the most wide open I remember it being was the Jabari Smith, Paolo Banchero, and Chet Holmgren debate. And then before that, it was, do you remember, I think it was the 2013 draft where Anthony Bennett ends up going.
The Bennett draft came to mind, yeah.
And this feels like it might have the level of mystery that 2013 has, which is bonkers.
Yeah, no, I'm not even, I know the names. Like, Sar keeps coming up at the top, and Zachary Risache is another name that we keep hearing as a possibility. And then after that, I don't know. Yeah, if it's 5, great, that could go number 1. But to get back to Atlanta, I'm like pinky toenail deep in draft prep right now. So you've got a huge advantage on me.
By that, you mean that it takes place in June?
Is it? Does it? Is that when it?
Yeah, maybe they rescheduled it like the draft lottery for the afternoon on a Sunday.
Yeah. Is the draft tomorrow? I think that's what.
By the way, I freaked out. It was Mother's Day, and I already mentioned earlier in the podcast that we were hosting brunch at our house. But of course, like, I have the lottery on, so I'm in there watching it, and I see Atlanta jump up to the top 4. And so I'm like, when I saw that they won, I literally said, "Holy fuck!" And all I heard from like my kitchen / was, "What's wrong? What happened?" And I was just like, "This basketball team on this draft lottery thingamajig."
I thought you were gonna get someone yelling from the other room like language. That'd be more fun.
Oh, they know. I can't help I don't know what it is. I think I grew up in a household where my mom wouldn't even let me have like the parental advisory. She used to confiscate them when she saw that I got them. That maybe like as I got older, it was just, oh, I'm gonna uncork all the because now I just use profanity as like a form of compliment.
Atlanta Hawks. No, okay, here's what I think. I think to me, it doesn't make Atlanta's direction any clearer necessarily. Like, because they got number 1, it means they're way more likely to trade Murray or Trae Young or neither, or to keep the pick, or like, I don't have a good feel for that. What I do think, I think I'm confident that it offers you cover, at least from like a PR standpoint, to do like a semi-drastic thing like trade Trae Young, because you can say it's not like you're going to sell anyone on like, well, we have this and this is going to be our next superstar, because I think even casual Hawks fans will know like this doesn't seem like the draft for that.
Although if Alex Sarr has been the one that, whenever you talk about these comps, and I know they're imperfect, you normally land in like the middle end when people are trying to make them. And Sarr keeps getting compared to Jaren Jackson Jr. And I'm like, you're going to draft him. That's great.
Yeah.
Defensive player of the year.
I mean, it's just so unknown, but do you understand what I mean though? Like if you were, let's say they had landed where they were supposed to in the lottery, which was like what, 10th?
Yeah.
Then you trade Trae Young for whatever you get for him. And like the 10th pick is whatever. Like it's not like a needle mover in terms of, hey, we got this. Right. Let's think about this. Let's focus on this. This is a bright thing for our future. Being number 1, I think, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think if you move Young or Murray, like that might feel like a disappointment in a vacuum, or if the circumstances were different, because it's like things are going to change and they may not get better in the short term, although that would be the point of trading any of those guys. But having that pick is kind of like, it just offers like cover, or offers like a distraction isn't quite the right word, but it's like,
is it optionality?
Other avenue of things we can think about as Hawks fans, or as an organization, we can still like, but hey, we still have this. I don't know. That's what it feels like to me. Not having a good feel for like, should they just use the pick on someone, or should they move it, or anything like that yet.
I think what's tough about, because what it doesn't solve is, I don't think it gives them the cover. I don't think it gives them the cover to enter a full tilt rebuild, unless
no, that's not what I mean.
No, I know, but I'm saying, because it gives them some level of optionality, but does it also, because if you're just saying, let's just say Sarr's the pick, and it kind of works out where it's like, yeah, they do need wings, but like that's the position you come in. We've seen some rookies play really well defensively over the past few years.
Right.
And like Clint Capella's there as a placeholder. You're not really married to Onyeka Okongwu as your starter. Not that you need to move him. Him and Sarr could probably play together if you believe in Sarr's jump shot. But like, I feel like if you were to frame it this way for me, that is it more likely that they just draft Alex Sarr and then kind of stand pat and go the route of, well, what does this, or maybe they move Clint Capella and like, what does this do for us? Or do they do something more drastic? I'd probably go with the stand pat, because everything just feels pointless. Because even if you're moving Murray, unless you're attaching picks to Murray, which, okay, who are you getting? But like, where is the trade that you're getting better at the top of your roster? You're either breaking him up into more depth, or you're trading him for picks. And unless those picks are your own picks, which San Antonio controls for 3 years, in 2025, 2026, and 2027, the 26 one's a swap, like this doesn't make entering a rebuild to me any more palatable. And so it's the same question with Trae Young. I've seen a lot of the framing of this makes it more likely they trade Young. And now, if you're telling me that the Spurs are giving them back all their own picks, fine. Then I'll listen to that. But if they're not, then you need to explain to me how this makes Atlanta better in the short and long term by moving Trae Young after winning the number 1 pick.
Yeah, because like if you do let's just say it's to the Lakers and you get Reeves and Hachimura and Gabe Vincent and a first or 2 or whatever,
you better get the 3 first that they could offer if you're flipping Trae Young. That's all.
I don't know. Are they willing? Yeah, right. So they probably should be willing to do that. But like that plus the number one pick plus Murray and the current roster, like what is that? You know, I don't. It's
Not a better team than you had, I don't think.
probably not. So then you are. I don't know. Maybe we're overthinking it, and like the number one pick actually doesn't play a role at all in Atlanta, whether Atlanta should rebuild or not, because it's not the type of pick that anyone views as like their cornerstone coming. Like we're here we go. We're getting Chet, we're getting Paolo, we're getting Edwards, whatever. Although none of those guys were viewed as cornerstones at the time, which is maybe instructive. And it's like Edward, there were questions about Edwards. Remember, it was like, oh, this draft's not so hot. But like maybe, I don't know, maybe just make the pick and assume that because everybody thinks this draft sucks, they're all wrong. And like there's gonna be a half dozen guys that'll be all stars / whatever coming out of this. So just I don't know. I'll be interested to see if you start hearing leaks of like they're shopping it, like unequivocally shopping it, like that would be very interesting to me.
Well, Landry Fields was basically speechless when they were asking him questions about anything, because it was basically, how the fuck did this happen type deal. Like, why are we sitting here right now at this? I think we'll hear a lot of noise about them shopping it, but it could just be degrees of they're looking at getting I mentioned this to you for the top. Like, what if Washington really wants Sarr and they're worried Atlanta will take him? They're offering you number 26 and number 2 for number 1. And so the Hawks get to play they really like one of these wings that are right there. And then we're going to get an extra first round pick. And so it could be something like that. There's also, I mean, you talk about the Spurs giving them back their own picks. Like the Spurs have 4 and 8 and Atlanta's own picks. Like how many do you need to attach to 4 or 8 to move up to 1? Because then Atlanta if this happened, if the Spurs said, hey, here's number 8, we'll give you back your 25 and then either your swap or your 2027 pick to move up to first. Like that actually makes a rebuild more palatable because you control more of your own future draft and you're still sitting high up in the order. I think there could be something like that. In terms of sheer player equity, though, I was trying to think of, okay, the Hawks are a team because you do have Trae Young. Like maybe they really want to win now. Who is the best player that you can envision getting for the number 1 pick? And like, you don't need to attach anything else other than salary to it. And the name I came up with, I really like him, but like, I don't know if it's enough, was Mikal Bridges. And so if Brooklyn comes at you and says, we will give you Mikal Bridges, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Phoenix's 2027 pick for number 1. I don't know who says no there. Given what we know about this draft, why would Brooklyn do all that? Or is it Atlanta saying, okay, like we're giving up the number 1 pick for the chance to get Mikal Bridges, who can be the 3rd best player on the title team, which is, that's great. But
it's tough because I don't know how to evaluate Bridges right now. He's in this weird, like middle space. My first reaction was like, oh, I think Brooklyn says no, because Bridges is like a known commodity and is very good, but maybe not great. And this number 1 pick might get you, like, what are the odds that this first overall pick gets you someone that will become as good as Bridges? Probably less than 50%, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard because we're still not totally sure how good Bridges is exactly. I think he's
shown that he could be like 2.5, like like an option 2B or something.
But with like insane scalability, like with just anywhere fit, right? So that's like maybe that gets him all the way up to the equivalent of like a number 2, but you know what I mean, like via a different route. I don't know if
Andrew Wiggins was the 2nd best player on a title team. Mikal Bridges can certainly be the second best player on.
Let us never forget. Let us never forget that glorious.
And Brooklyn's situation is complicated themselves because they don't control their own draft. Next time they control their own draft pick, I think it's 2028, like Atlanta does. It's like maybe it's okay. Well, it's cool that we have this number 1 pick, but like that's not going to augment our own asset base. I do think though that and this speaks to a larger draft class than Atlanta. I would just make the pick, by the way, if I'm Atlanta. I'm assuming you if it's a matter of moving down and like you're not really that high on Sarr and you want to capitalize, like maybe San Antonio or Detroit or someone really wants him, but I would make the pick. I do think, though, the ambiguity or the shallow impressions of the draft class are going to lend itself to chaotic activity when it comes to trades leading up to or on draft night.
Yeah, I think it could go that way. I also think what we could see is a bunch of teams all wanting to trade down and nobody being interested in trading up. You know, that because if you're not sure like what the difference is between 6-1 or 10-4 or 7-3, like you're not going to want to move up into that spot. Like, although maybe that changes as we get through more workouts and things like that, where it's like Sar just is clearly the guy, for example. If I'm Atlanta, my number one choice would probably be to trade back if I could, but I don't think there's going to be like a line out the door of teams scrambling to get that pick. It doesn't seem like that right now.
Would you trade number 1 and DeJounte Murray to Detroit for number 5, Asar Thompson and Jaden Ivey?
Yep, I would.
Who says no?
Atlanta says yes. So Detroit is saying no. Had to really work that out myself there.
I guess because if you're moving up to get Sar and you already have Duren, but I don't think Duren's good enough to like, and you could probably sandwich Duren into that deal, but it's to me, Jaden Ivey just doesn't really have trade value right now. Like maybe he's different outside the confines of Detroit or out of Monty Williams' doghouse, but he has not shown at minimum. I'll put it. I think this is the kind of he's not shown enough as an off ball, just shooter offensive player for me to be like, this guy has net positive trade value 2 seasons into his career.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's in the PJ Washington camp to some extent of like, let's see what it looks like on a real team. I unabashedly still have some Jaden Ivey stock, and it might need to be relinquished next year if we get another season like this. But I probably value him more highly than certainly you do, and most. Like, but if you're selling, if it's from Atlanta's perspective, and maybe if I'm trading Murray, I'm probably not trading Trae Young. Let me get some Asar Thompson on this team to defend. I think that's pretty exciting to me.
My only pause for Atlanta would be there is a chance that as soon as next season, you ended up trading away the 2 best players in this deal. Because there's a chance that the number 1 pick is better than Asar Thompson. Like there's a chance that could absolutely happen.
It kind of should be likely you normally, right?
Right. And so like, that's why I was like, do they need Duren too? But then like, how intrigued are they by him and a Kungwu? And also what is purposes Jaden Ivey serve in Atlanta? It's like, okay, Murray's gone. And now you have this really high end. Does it make it then, oh, we could move Young? And like, now we're really or is it, oh, we want to try and groom or develop him? Or is he just trade bait in another deal?
It's really hard because like, I mean, even Landry Fields basically said it. I keep pulling the same quote up when I'm talking about the Hawks of like, basically he says like, we've seen the numbers, the lineup data, and like, we kind of know it doesn't work. And he's referring to, he doesn't say it quite that explicitly, but it's like, we know, we have the information, I think is about as far as he went. But the implication is like, yeah, we get it. The Young Murray thing has not been what we wanted it to be. And so like, that leads you to think, well, like, because together in Atlanta, they aren't really that valuable. Like it doesn't work. That, you know, okay, we can pretend like they both don't have separate objective trade value, that where like the packages should still be like pretty significant for both of those guys, because, you know, Trae Young on team X is like super valuable maybe, and same with Murray on another team, but together on Atlanta, their value is not very high. So it's like, when you're putting together trade packages, it's really difficult for me to like square the fact that, well, we all know this doesn't work here. And so like, how do we get anything for these guys? But other teams are like, yeah, we'll take Trae Young. He's an offense by himself. We'll work with that. I don't know. So that's another layer to like the complications the number 1 pick brings, is like, what are the relative valuations of both of those guards around the league? I don't feel like I know. I don't feel like I have a great sense of what those guys are worth.
No, I'd be with you. I think everyone assumes that they would get a haul for Trae Young, but then if you're sitting here saying that they should look to trade Trae Young, I tend to value Trae Young more than you do. But just if that's the impression of, yeah, they should move him, if that's how you're feeling about someone who's just entering his prime and supposed to be all NBA type player, like why are all these other teams going to feel so much differently that there's going to be this sweepstakes for him? So
it's hard. I don't know. Any other draft thing?
No, there's no other draft things because I have moved on to stat padding.
That's two times in a row I've stepped on the the sound effect for stat padding. Not a good streak.
That's a major bummer. Thanks to everyone who sent stuff in. I'm so far behind on my direct messages because I'm trying to figure out how to do 30 hours of work in 24-hour days. But I can start us off for you. We have one from a Rubik's Gal. Are you ready? Clue 1. I grew up in a single parent household. My mom worked at multiple jobs to raise the family.
That is not going to help me.
Okay. Clue 2. My last ring was with the Los Angeles Lakers towards the end of my career, though most people associate me with another franchise.
Last ring was with my last ring. Most people associate Robert Horry.
Incorrect. I like the guess, though. Was his last ring with the Lakers?
I don't know. Probably not. No, I bet it was. Or no, did he get a Spurs one after?
I thought he got a Spurs one but I can't remember.
He probably did. Okay.
Clue 3. I have played roughly 1,000 games and started over 75% of them.
So big time starter, ring with the Lakers, which was his last ring, but had some with other teams. Well, no, I was going to. Oh, is it Danny Green?
Incorrect.
Oh, felt good about that one. Thought I had it. Okay.
Clue 4. I am primarily remembered for playing one position, though I've played both guard positions.
Oh. My last ring was for the Lakers. Like, who's a guard that is not associated with the Lakers but won a title there? A combo guard. I feel like I should throw a guess out just because. It's not Rondo. Rondo's only a point guard.
That is correct. It is Rondo.
Hey.
There's kind of a twist here.
Okay.
So I'm going to go through the clues one by one.
All right.
Clue 5. I have played for the Lakers, Clippers, the Cavaliers, and the Bulls, and perhaps other teams. Clue 6. I was drafted in the first round 2 years after the GOAT, and I won a ring with him. Clue 7. I averaged 1.5 plus steals per game over my career and multiple seasons with more than 2 steals per game. Clue 8. I wore the number 4 and number 9 jerseys. And here's the twist. Clue 9. What if I told you I'm not one but 2 players? That's right. Every one of these clues fits 2 NBA players drafted in different years. Hint, the GOATs in question are LeBron and Jordan. Would you care to venture a guess as to who the other player is?
Wait a minute. So all these clues apply to somebody else besides Rondo. So
yes, and there's one. I'll give you the additional clue. One of us went to Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and the other went to the University of Kentucky in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
We know that the Kentucky one is obviously Rondo.
God, who got the but this is also 2 years after Jordan is this other guy. Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 years after Jordan.
So that's 87. Oh,
played for the Lakers, Clippers, Cavs, and Bulls.
Oh God, so much work went into this.
Lakers. Also won a ring with Jordan, don't forget.
Oh shit. Lakers, Clippers, Cavs, and Bulls. Ron Harper.
Correct. There you go.
Ron Harper is a. I mentioned the 96 Bulls team, or the second 3P Bulls team.
That was psychopathic stuff, Rubik's Gal. I favorite.
That was
I like it.
Intense. Appreciate that effort. Before we go any farther, you asked me last podcast, like, what rule would I change? And I feel like I really dropped the ball. I was unprepared. I did think of one.
Well, you're unprepared because you don't get warnings for stat padding.
That's okay. I should have had it ready. It's a specific rule. If you act like you were hit in the face in an NBA basketball game, and in fact, we're not hit in the face upon review, it is a technical foul on you. And if you do it again, you can be ejected. Like, it's a normal technical foul. The other thing I thought about was, like, whatever the penalty would have been had you been hit in the face as severely as you acted like you were, that penalty is assessed to you if you were not hit in the face. I'm just sick of guys like getting hit in the chest or shoulder or not hit at all and go down in a heap with hands over face and like act like they've been shot. So I would like to legislate.
You don't like flopping.
It really all comes back to flopping. I'm sick of it. And this did happen to come up while I was watching the Dallas Mavericks. So I'll leave it there. All right. I have one for you, Dan, from Nikolche Kolev here. This is a guy that comes up very often for so many reasons. That's
the clue?
not a clue. That's just
Oh.
the clue number one. After a 3-year career at Marquette, invaluable information for Dan, I was drafted in the 30s. Just Marquette players, go.
Greg Buckner.
Clue number two. My draft was a weird one. Despite only 23 teams existing at the time, the Cleveland Cavaliers were awarded a courtesy 24th pick because their owner, Ted Stepien, kept trading away their first-round picks, which prompted the eventual rule against trading first-round picks in consecutive years.
So they were drafted 24th overall is what? No, they said they were drafted in the 30s.
Drafted in the 30s. The draft was a weird one, though, because he's basically giving you, like, there's only 23 teams, so this is like a minute ago. But the Cavs got a 24th because Ted Stepien was a lunatic.
I don't even have a guess.
All right, clue three. I promise you will get this. Before I got drafted in 1983, so now we have the year, I represented the U.S. men's national team at the 1982 World Championship, helping them win a silver. Individually, I was awarded the MVP of the tournament. I'm assuming you don't remember the 1982 World Championships.
Nope.
All right, here you go. During my 13-year career, I ended up playing for 4 teams. A one-time All-Star, I spent 8 years playing for the team that drafted me, Team X. I was the all-time leading assist man for Team X with 3,866 until earlier this year when their multi-time All-Star passed me. He now has exactly 2 assists more than me.
Ooh. Yeah, I got nothing.
Okay. Clue 5. I come from a family of basketball players. My uncle Jim Brewer was a 1982 NBA champion. I don't remember Jim Brewer.
I don't remember him either.
All right. Clue 6. Remember that all-star guard that passed me as the leading assist man on Team X? There's a chance he doesn't get to extend his lead this coming season.
There's a chance he doesn't get to. So he's a free agent, I guess, is what they're saying.
That's how I took it.
A guard who's a free agent that just set a record for the franchise, and then that's not even the answer of what the question is. He would have to surpass this person.
When I looked through this earlier, I don't know who that is.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So someone's long-standing. They're a free agent? Are they, or are they just like going to be traded? This is tough. Yeah, I guess continue to give me. Wait, let me see. Let me see if I could just pull something. No, that's not that. So I keep thinking of like, oh, I'm trying to backtrack from who would hold the record in assists, and then it's like, well, they're not going to leave, but they're not in a position to where they're.
And then even if you get that player, you have to know that the actual guess a player you're doing here played for that franchise, which is like, there's 2 layers going on.
Yeah, please carry on.
All right. Changing gears. Clue 7, back to my talented family. My oldest son has played in the NBA G League. My daughter played volleyball at the University of Florida and is married to an NBA player, while my middle son has spent 11 years in the NBA.
Is this no, because it has spent 11 years in the NBA. Can you read that last clue again?
Yep. Clue 8. Did I mention how talented my family is? I've spent more than 20 years. Oh, I almost blew it reading you clue 8 because it starts the same way. Back to my talented family. Clue 7. My oldest son has played in the NBA G League. My daughter played volleyball at the University of Florida and is married to an NBA player, while my middle son has spent 11 years in the NBA.
My middle son. Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay. You probably will get it here. Clue 8. Did I mention how talented my family is? I've spent more than 20 years as a head coach in the NBA. During
Doc
that time,
Rivers?
what'd you say?
Is it Doc Rivers?
It is Doc Rivers. It is
I
Doc
I
Rivers.
didn't realize that I didn't know that Austin Rivers was a middle child, I
I
guess,
didn't
because on the
either.
last one I thought about I should have just said Doc Rivers on that one. That was a
So
tough one
I wonder
for me.
then, I feel like I should know this. So I think when you said like, or is he going to be traded? I think maybe the guy that passed Rivers for all-time assists for a team is Trae Young with the Hawks. Because I think Rivers was drafted by the Hawks, but I really don't know. I think of Rivers as, I don't know what, like a Nick maybe.
I always associate Doc Rivers with 3-1 leads being blown. So I can't no.
I'm gonna look it up.
Are you ready to do a guess a player from Mike?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
It was
Who
Atlanta,
won?
by the way. Sorry, go ahead.
So then it must have been Trae.
I think so.
Clue 1. I was drafted by the Washington Bullets in the lottery in the 1980s.
Gotta try. Bullets 80s. That's too far back. I can't think of anybody that's on that Bullets from the 80s. I would love to have attempted a one shot, but I'm not gonna have an answer for that.
Clue 2. My playing time as a rookie dropped significantly when my coach was fired and replaced by Wes Unseld Sr. Clearly, poor coaching decisions ran in the family. Regardless, despite only starting 14 games, I led the team in steals.
Ooh. I was gonna say Manute Bol, but I don't think he's a high
That is
steal.
incorrect.
Nor was I sure that the Bullets drafted him or that it was in the 80s. Sorry, led the team in steals as a sophomore?
As a rookie.
As a rookie.
Yeah. Only started 14 games and led the Bullets in steals.
I got nothing.
Clue 3. Washington gonna Washington. They left me unprotected in the upcoming expansion draft.
Scott Skiles.
Incorrect. Good guess, though. Clue 4. The following season, the expansion team that drafted me made me a sixth man.
I would just guess Scott Skiles again, probably.
That is still incorrect, believe it or not.
So wait, so this is I guess we could be late 80s and our expansion teams are what, like Miami and then Orlando or Charlotte, I guess is probably in there. Oh, is this Muggsy?
Correct. That's good. You got it on clue 3 of 11.
I read a biography of Muggsy Bogues in 7th grade. I remember there was like a big deal that because he was from Baltimore and it was a big deal that he played for the Bullets for a minute.
I'm sorry, you got it on clue 4 out of 11. Though. That was impressive. Clue 5, I'm going to become a fixture in the team's high tempo offense for the next 10 years. Clue 6, in 97, my relationship with the team soured massively as my coach suggested I retire due to knee issues I'd been having. The next week, they signed my replacement. Clue 7, 2 games into the 97 season, I was traded to the Warriors with Tony Delk for BJ Armstrong. I went on to lead the Warriors in assists despite only playing 36 games due to hamstring and knee injuries and chickenpox. I'm starting to think I'm somewhat cursed. Clue 8, in 1999, I signed with the Raptors, reuniting with my best friend from 2 teams ago, Del Curry. Clue 9, I played 83 games in the purple, black, and red before being traded again to the Knicks for Chris Childs and a first-round pick. That offseason, I was shipped again to Dallas for Shandon Anderson, Howard Isley, and Glenn Rice. I stepped away from basketball to take care of my sick mother. Clue 10, Mark Cuban, who just bought the Mavs, fully guaranteed the remainder of my contract before waiving me so that the rest of my contract would be paid out to me, totaling over $3 million, something I publicly thanked Cuban for in 2011 as his act of kindness was not lost on me. Clue 11, I'm the short king as I am the shortest player in NBA history.
Nice. I love Muggsy Bogues was a very early like favorite player for me, like among my favorites, just because like, oh, he's little, like that's cool. I'm almost that tall. All right, I have several from Mike. I'll give you one of them. Would you like what level of obscurity would you prefer here? Like on a 1 to 10 scale, with 1 being not obscure.
Give me a 7.
Oh, okay. There's only one choice here then. Clue number 1. I was drafted in 2019 outside the lottery.
Who was the number 1 pick in 2019 again? That was...
Jesus, who was 2019?
Too early for the... Because 2020, 2019, 2020, 2020, 2022, 2020, 2023.
Is
So
that
this
the
would have been their
argument?
5th season, which means they're already on their extension.
Well, if they're outside the lottery, I mean, that they might have only got like one of those 2-year deals or 3-year deals. It doesn't say how far outside the lottery.
Oh, wait, outside the lottery or outside the first round? They're still on a
Outside the
rookie scale.
lottery.
They're
That
still
could
on
be
a rookie scale, so that's the same difference.
What if? Okay, all right. He was drafted. That's all I know so far.
Oh, okay. All right, keep going.
Well, I haven't read the rest of the clues. I don't want to mislead you and say like it's definitely not the first round. I don't know
Oh,
that.
yeah, I'm just describing. So I'm thinking he was still drafted in the first round. Okay, drafted outside the lottery in 2019, 2020. I mean, in 2019. But my point was this would be his 5th season then, because
19, 20, 20. Yeah. Right.
So this was his 5th season, unless he's out of the NBA. Who was drafted outside the lottery in 2019 that's still in the NBA? 5th season. I'm trying to think of who started. Aaron Nesmith.
It's not Aaron Nesmith. By the way, can we sidebar and figure out who was the first pick in 2019? Because I can't remember.
Was that Zion's draft?
No, it couldn't be. Could it?
He just started his extension this year, didn't he? Or no?
That's the Zion Jaw.
I don't want to look it up because then I'm.
Yeah. No, I'll look it up later. I'm so bad at that, going by the year. Okay. Clue 2. Before being drafted, I played professionally for the Serbian team KK Megabasket, also being loaned out to 2 other teams in that league, one in Serbia, one in Montenegro. I am not from one of the former Yugoslavian nations.
Oh, man. Facundo Campazzo wasn't drafted, right?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay, carry on.
All right, clue 3. I am the 2nd highest drafted player from my home country.
Which is,
I don't
we
know.
don't know it.
We don't know it. And as I'm trying to think of it, because I know who it is, because I looked ahead, I can't remember. Clue 4. Though not a lottery pick, I was thought of as someone who could have or should have gone in the lottery because of my upside, having been coached at KK Megabasket, a club known for developing NBA talent.
Zip zilch nada for me. I don't even have a name to throw. I just start naming people that were drafted in 2019. That's assuming we're thinking of the right draft class.
Right. Well, I also could not have told you that this guy was drafted in 2019. Like,
awesome.
If you'd given me like a 3-year window, I probably could have got close, but I don't know.
So you're saying you thought he was in the league for less time or more time?
I mean, now that I've had time to think about it, sounds about right, but I'd probably say less. If I had to guess, I would lean towards less. You asked for a 7 on the obscurity scale, so this is you signed up.
Do I know this player?
Yeah, you know. Clue 5. I didn't get much playing time in my first 2 seasons, averaging only 10 minutes a game in 99 games, as I was buried behind a glut of other big men on my team.
Okay, so they're a big man,
and
there's a glut. And that doesn't really help me.
No.
Just a big in 2019? No, keep going.
Okay. In the postseason in my 2nd season, I was fined by my team for getting into an on-court altercation with an assistant coach.
I feel like I should know this one now.
I don't remember that.
Then maybe not. Fined for an altercation in what year in the playoffs?
It'd be his 2nd season, so it'd be the
2021 playoffs.
Yeah, right.
Pandemic time. My brain was mush.
Still like, what month even were the playoffs that year? August?
Yeah, yes, keep. It was a young big fined for an altercation
on a team where he's buried behind a glut of other bigs. That's a good clue, because I do think of him like in that context at that time.
Yeah, keep going.
All right, clue 7. The next season, I started 16 games and started to develop the signs of an outside shooting game.
Holy hell, who is this?
That's such a good clue.
This was his third season?
I believe so, yeah. Yes.
2021, 2022 starts apparently taking threes. Rashawn Holmes?
No, that's a good guess though. Also, you know that well, is it said explicitly? This is a European guy. But
Oh.
based on all this KK Mega and
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
although like
Uh,
the clue, to be fair, the clues don't say that specifically. It says he's not from Serbia or Montenegro, but like, okay, I'll just tell you that. That might give it away.
all right, carry on.
All right. Clue 8. Here you go, Dan. In my 4th season, I was waived after the trade deadline and ultimately signed with Orlando.
Oh, is it Bobo?
Nope.
Is this waived and then signed with Orlando? Mo Wagner?
Nope.
He signed in free agency. That's right. At the trade deadline. Goga Batadze?
That's correct. I was
Okay.
wanting to tell you, like, you're so close. You're just all over it. Okay. Clue, you only had 2 more here. I think for sure clue 9 was I started 33 games this past season, and some people thought that the Magic might move Wendell Carter Jr. because I was playing so well as a
I would have
starter.
gotten it there. Yeah.
Because we definitely talked about that. And also the shooting clue was really sneaky because like that's not the player he became. Like he
I
became.
forgot, and now I'm remembering his altercation on the Pacers
Oh,
bench. It was
really?
with an assistant coach, right? I don't know
I
if that was
think,
specified in the clue.
yeah, I don't remember that. I remember the minute there where it was like this Pacers center that's behind Turner and I guess Sabonis and probably somebody else is like, oh, he can shoot threes. But that was like just, I don't know, maybe a month or 2 or something. Clue 10 was I went viral before ever getting drafted as there was a photo of hundreds of reporters interviewing the player at the table beside me, Zion Williamson. There you go. There's our answer. And no one was at my table to interview me. Dwayne Wade and Draymond Green both said on podcasts that I should use that image as motivation. I have not. You don't know that, Mike. Maybe he's very motivated by that still. He's still in the league. I'm Goga Patadze. Sufficiently obscure, I think.
That was a tough one. I should have went with an easier one to feel good about myself, but what are
A
you gonna
couple
do?
other ones I think you would have gotten pretty quickly. Although I haven't read the clues, so I don't know.
Well, considering we've been going for over 2 hours and 16 minutes, those will be saved for next time. Grant, would you like to take us out of here?
Sure. Another banner get in and get out podcast by us.
Look, we're only dropping 2 a week, although we dropped 3. This is the first week we're probably only going to drop 2 unless I put out one over the weekend, but we're giving you probably over 4 hours of content. In those
Some would say too much, probably. I don't know. Maybe not enough. Thanks, everyone, especially to those of you who contributed for the guest players. Always appreciated. Thanks for listening. If you're not rating, reviewing, subscribing, please help us out and do those things. Tell your friends about the podcast. Spread the word. We don't know where there is to go beyond number 1. We just like to explore it and see what other heights are out there. I think that's going to do it. Other than to say, if you want to contribute in the future, join our Discord. Links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. Same place you can find some merch. Shouts, Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.